Thank you, Mr. Gearbaugh. Thank you for leading tonight's work meeting. I greatly appreciate it. Clerk Royal, are we good to go for the regular meeting?
We are.
Okay, very good. Then I'll call this regular Saline City Council meeting to order at 7:02 p.m. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Morrow.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh.
Present.
Councilmember Seal.
Present.
Councilmember Mitchell.
Here.
Councilmember Dillon.
Present.
Councilmember Del Orco.
Present.
Councilmember Camaro Sulak.
Present.
Thank you, Clerk Roy. Would you please call the roll for staff as well?
City Manager Campbell.
Here.
City Engineer DPW Director Fordyce.
Here.
Wastewater Treatment Plant Superintendent Rogowski. Not yet. City Treasurer Bennett.
Here.
Assistant City Manager Community Development Director Green.
Here.
Police Chief Hart.
Here.
Parks and Rec Director Scruggs. Here.
Very good. A quorum is present. We appreciate everyone's attendance tonight. If there are guests or members of the general public with us, we welcome you as well. You will have an opportunity to comment this evening. In fact, there are 3 opportunities to comment this evening. There's an initial public comment period that is reserved for agenda items. There's a second public comment period at the end of the meeting in which you can comment on any municipal issue you'd like to comment on. And there is a public hearing regarding self-storage on on Monroe Street, on Maple Road, North Maple Road specifically. We are not, unfortunately, we are not able to allow you to speak, but if you'd like to type in a comment and note that it's for one of the public comment periods, it will be preserved for the sake of posterity and also read tonight for council and staff's benefit. So feel free to type a comment at any time. And again, please note which public comment period you would like it read at, whether it's the first public comment period, the second, or at the public hearing. I will note for my colleagues, I will be calling on folks for questions and comments in the reverse order that I used last week. So I will begin with Camaro Sulak and end with Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh. And again, for my benefit, I will call upon people for when I'm seeking someone to move a motion and second. If you are not comfortable doing so and I call on you, just say no, thank you, and I'll move on to the next person. So with that, we have a motion to approve the agenda as submitted. Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh, would you move to approve the agenda as submitted?
Yes.
Okay. And Councilwoman Dillon, would you second?
Yes, Mayor, I do want to mention that per our conversation, there were 2 things that I wanted to add to the discussion. Do you want that as an amendment or just add it as a discussion item at the end?
Yeah, why don't we do, so the first was a comprehensive report on COVID reopening, and the second one was to discuss the schedule for our upcoming work meeting week from Monday. Why don't you bring those up under reports and other announcements?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. So it's been properly moved and seconded by Gearbaugh and Dillon to approve the agenda as submitted. All ththose in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. There are no absences this evening, so we'll proceed to the first of 2 public comments. This is citizen comments on agenda items. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time and make comment or question on an item that appears on this agenda. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to comment is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record. And again, to type your comments under the comment section, and they will be preserved and read by the city clerk. Again, this public comment period is reserved for agenda items only, whether those be action items or items enumerated as under the discussion portion of tonight's agenda. I'll ask a couple times, are there any citizen comments? Clerk Royal, have you received any comments?
I have not.
Okay. We'll give it just a few more seconds. One last opportunity. Are there any citizen comments on agenda items? The record will note that there are none. So we'll proceed to the one presentation of the evening, which is an update on the 2020 census. I believe we have present the 4 members of the 2020 Census Working Committee, which would be chaired by Deputy Clerk Bloom, and would also include Councilwoman Dillon, Library Director Mary Ellen Mulcrome, and the Executive Director of the Senior Center, Nancy Cowan. It is a group consisting entirely of ladies, and I think that's wonderful. We appreciate your ongoing efforts to promote the 2020 census. It's vitally important. My understanding from speaking to my colleague, Councilwoman Dillon, earlier today is that, Janet, you'll be taking the lead on this. Is that correct?
For me.
That is correct, with the others adding comment if they so choose.
Very good. Well, I'll start with you, Councilwoman, and then at the conclusion of your remarks, if Ms. Bloom, Mary Ellen McCromb, or Nancy Cowan would like to share remarks, we will entertain them at that time. Councilwoman Dillon, the floor is yours.
So thank you. You just went through who our committee members were, so I won't repeat that. The group was formed about a year ago in March of 19, which at that time seemed like the census was so far away. But it was a quick year, and really our purpose was to help promote the census, to make people aware of it, and to have people respond to it. This is the first year that the census was being done online, which is a totally different format than people are used to, having somebody knock on their door with a clipboard. What happened was April 1st of this year was called Census Day, and I've got a few little things that I'm going to show people. You should have received in the mail a big folder like this, which actually has a paper copy of the census in it, which you would have the option to do as a paper, or you can go online or call an 800 number and do the census. And as soon as you got that done, you were done. It was quick and easy. It's about a 10-minute process. If you haven't done your census yet, they're going to keep contacting you about it. And then you probably would get something that looks like this, that says, reminder, you still have not done your census. Please do it. And if you're wondering why I have these, it's because I actually chose not to complete my census as of yet, because I wanted to see that the process was actually going to work. These are the things they said they were going to do. And lo and behold, in the mail today, I received a postcard. So now everybody knows my address, by the way, that says, by the way, you are required by law to do this. So they're giving people ample warning about it. They really need you to do it. The census is the basis. It's once every 10 years, and it really is the basis for funding for our community. It is congressional representation and a lot of things that will have to last about a decade. So it's very important. We're very fortunate right now. As of May 3rd, the city of Saline's response rate is 72.5%, which is higher than the national rate currently. So we're very excited about that. But we obviously want that number to keep going higher. So we are going to continue to push this out. You'll probably see some big campaigns on social media coming up. Unfortunately, there were some events that had been planned that due to COVID, we had to cancel. We were actually going to have some kiosks set up where people would be able to do it, and if they needed assistance, people that were familiar with the census would be able to assist them without seeing their personal information. So I do encourage everybody to please, if you have not responded, please do so. Because if you don't do it based on these notices that you're getting, once the COVID-19 restrictions are lifted, they will eventually be sending somebody to knock on your door. So the easiest way to do it, the website is www.2020census.gov. There's also some great resources and videos that show you about the process. Unfortunately, with the Zooms, we can't really do them. We don't have the bandwidth to show you the videos here, but we will put up these links on the city's homepage, as well as some other resources, the library and the senior center. So be sure to be on the lookout for them. And if at any point you have any questions about the census, please don't hesitate to reach out to any of the committee members or just call City Hall. and they will put you in touch with someone that can help you.
Very good. Thank you, Councilwoman. Janet, can you do me a favor? You and I discussed this earlier this afternoon. Sometime this week, can you forward to City Council a link of the video and any other pertinent information reference to 2020 census? As I communicated to you this afternoon, I'm hoping that by a month from now, early June, folks in the Saline community are basically nauseated with how many postings and advertisements we're going to put on the web and elsewhere promoting the 2020 census, because it is absolutely critical. And what I would ask of the city manager is perhaps Councilwoman Dillon can include you in those messages. And I would also like to see census posts put up on the city's Facebook page, the police department's Facebook page, Parks and Rec's Facebook page. We need to do our utmost to disseminate this information because, again, our congressional representation and a lot of state and federal funding is directly tied to accurate and completion of the 2020 census.
Most definitely. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll start with Executive Director Nancy Cowan from the Senior Center. Nancy, appreciate you being with us this evening. Is there anything you would like to add? Make sure you're unmuted. Are you there, Nancy?
No, the host had muted me, so I wasn't unable to unmute myself, but thank you very much.
You are unmuted now. We can hear you perfectly.
Thank you so much. I certainly appreciated being a part of the group and meeting new individuals and working with such outstanding ladies. We've learned a lot through the process, and we are certainly working hard at the Senior Center. We had planned some in-person events to hopefully be able to assist seniors face-to-face. But of course, due to COVID-19 right now, we're unable to do that. We have sent a mass email actually this past weekend regarding the census with some links on step-by-step on how to complete the census, as well as a video just stating the importance of it. So we're going to keep doing those things. We'll do some posts on our Facebook page and website, as well as we have put my information out there for individuals to contact in case they need assistance at the Senior Center. So the last piece that we're doing is we're going to be working with our Meals on Wheels customers, which are clients, which are home-based individuals as it is, to make sure that they're able to complete the census and have been following up with that process.
Excellent. Thank you, Nancy. Appreciate your time this evening.
Thank you.
Mary Ellen McCromb, Director of the Saline District Library. Mary Ellen, thank you for being with us. Is there anything you would like to add this evening?
Thank you. Just a few things. As Nancy mentioned, we did have plans for other events and such that had to be canceled, but we did host census recruiters at the library, and we had the League of Women Voters do presentations, public presentations at the library and for the Saline Coalition for Equality Community. So those were, nice things to have. And I also wanted to mention that the Census Bureau has also made some operational adjustments based on COVID-19, and their schedule now will allow for online, phone, and mailed self-responses to the census questionnaire to continue through October 31st. But I do encourage everyone to do it as soon as you can. As was mentioned before, it's a simple process. If you don't have the information that was sent to you, you can still go on the website and search by your address and complete the questionnaire. So it's really important, and it's going to affect us for the next decade. And I also appreciate having been part of the group. And I would say we're still continuing. We have more work to do to keep getting the word out. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments and appreciate your attendance this evening. I don't believe Deputy Clerk Bloom is on the meeting tonight. Is that correct?
I think that is correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you again, ladies. Let's do a round of questions. I'll start with Councilmember Kamara Sulak, and if you have a specific question, if you want to direct it to any one of the three ladies, that would be great. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I I don't have any questions at the time. It's pretty straightforward, seems to be well addressed, and happy to say that we've completed it. So I don't have any questions at this time.
Okay, very good. Thank you, sir.
Wonderful job. Thank you.
Councilmember Del Orco.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also don't have any questions. I think they did a great job of presenting the information. I'm pleased to see that we have as good of a participation rate so far, and there's still some time to get those numbers up, so hopefully we can accomplish that goal.
Very good. Thank you, sir. Councilwoman Mitchell, any questions?
None. Am I muted?
Nope, I can hear you perfectly.
Okay, great. That's not true. I had one question. Traditionally, has something been put out through the schools?
Oh, I'm sorry. I will take, I don't know. I'm sorry, my dog is like, his toy is stuck under my desk right now.
You're fine.
So he's having a little bit of a meltdown. So, I don't know. We did discuss at one point engaging the schools. But I think what had happened, to be honest, was that it was going to be more of an end of the year, like towards the end of the school year aspect. And then as COVID-19 came about, it was going to be a flyer type thing that was going out. There's definitely still an opportunity to do an online notification through the schools, and that's an avenue I can absolutely pursue and mention to our committee chair.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Dillon. The only other question I have, is it possible to have some kind of a postcard to put in with Saline area social services clients? And that might be out of the purview for SAS. They might prefer not to, but I just wonder if that wouldn't reach a number of people.
The issue with that, I believe, is that we're tasked with the city of Saline.
Got it.
We have a much larger scope of clientele.
Sure.
And so, a general reminder would be fine. And they may be also another avenue in which we could tap into their social media and their contacts to put it out. But like I said, they're definitely beyond our boundaries also.
Sure. All right. Thank you, Your Honor. I'm all set.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Thank you, Councilwoman Mitchell. Councilman CO, any questions?
I have no questions, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. And Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh, any questions?
Just a quick one. When are they anticipating this to all wrap up, even though I know COVID's delaying some of it, but when is really the final deadline for submitting information? Ms. Dillon?
Oh, I'm sorry. So I think right now, I think it was just said that they've extended till October right now, the response. They haven't been clear. I'm sorry, I don't know for sure if that includes the in-person interviews or if that's when they will start them is in October.
Got it.
So I will clarify that and I can let you know.
I believe that, I'm sorry. I believe that was for self-response that would be allowed through October 31st.
Right.
So I think the other will take place after that.
Very good. Well, thank you, ladies, and Councilwoman Dillon. We'll look forward to an email so we can disseminate information via Facebook and through any other avenue that we as council members deem appropriate. Ladies, again, we appreciate your time and your leadership on this important issue. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, moving on tonight's agenda, we come to the consent portion of tonight's agenda. The following consent agenda will normally be adopted without discussion. However, at the request of any citizen or council member, any item may be removed from the consent agenda for council discussion. Councilmember CO, would you move to approve the consent agenda as submitted?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay,
Your Honor, I beg your pardon. It's
Please.
Kristen.
please.
Would you mind pulling out the resolution and reading that either now or later during reports?
Be happy to. Which resolution? We have a police and a National Public Works.
The National Public Works. I'm so sorry. I missed the police one.
Yep.
But, you know, I think it's nice to read those resolutions because I'm not sure everybody dives into the paperwork.
Very good. Let's do this, if you'll indulge me. Clerk Royal, I don't have those resolutions, the verbiage in front of me. Let's leave them on the consent agenda if Councilwoman Mitchell is comfortable with that. And Terry, if you would please be prepared to read them during the reports and other announcements section of tonight's agenda.
Certainly, or I can run them down to you.
Okay, all right. Whatever your preference is.
Thank you, Your Honor. I beg your pardon for the interruption.
No, that's fine. Would you be, Councilwoman Mitchell, would you be amenable to seconding that motion?
Yes, sir, I will second.
Okay. It's been properly moved by CO, seconded by Mitchell to approve the consent agenda as submitted. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. Thank you all. We move now to public hearing, agenda item 20-67. This is special land use for Saline self-storage facility. Before we entertain a motion to open the public hearing, I'll acknowledge the city manager and assistant city manager in the event that they have any questions, if they have any comments or if they have a statement they'd like to read this evening. Mr. Campbell, I'll start with you. Is there anything you would like to add, reference public hearing 20-67?
No, sir. I think Mike has maybe some comments.
Okay. Assistant city manager Green.
Hey, good evening. Thank you, sir. You guys got a lot of information regarding this project in your packet. So, and we also have David Braun, who is the potential developer on this call, along with Joseph Butko, who is the current owner of the property. So after the public hearing, when you guys are ready to discuss this, if you have any specific questions, feel free to ask me or either of them.
Okay. And we welcome our guests, Mr. Butko and Mr. Brown. We thank you for being with us, gentlemen, and we will entertain your comments and questions, or your comments, excuse me, in just a few moments. With that, we will open the public hearing, affording the public an opportunity to speak and address this issue. Councilmember Del Orco, would you move to open the public hearing at 7:23?
I will.
Okay. And Councilmember Kamara Sulak, would you second that?
I will second that.
Okay. It's been properly moved and seconded to open the public hearing at 7:23, affording the public an opportunity to speak to this issue. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. The public hearing is now open. Anyone from the community is welcome to speak to this matter. Again, please type your comments in the comment section. They will be preserved and read as part of the public record. We'll give folks just a few more seconds. And my faux pas, I should have asked earlier. Clerk Royal, did we receive any written or emailed comments reference agenda item 20-67?
Not as of yet, no.
I'll ask one final time if there are any comments reference this issue. Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh, would you be amenable to moving to close the public hearing at 7:24?
So move to close.
Okay. And Councilmember CO, would you second?
Second.
Okay. It's been properly moved and seconded to close the public hearing. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. We'll move on to the final motion, and we'll begin with a motion to simply acknowledge receipt of the April 28th, 2020 memo from Assistant City Manager, Community Development Director Green. Councilwoman Mitchell, would you move to simply acknowledge receipt?
I'll move, sir.
Okay. And Councilwoman Dillon, would you second? Are you muted, Janet?
Oh, sorry. Yes, I will second.
Very good. It's been properly moved by Mitchell, seconded by Dillon to acknowledge receipt. Mr. Green, is there anything else you would like to add before I provide just a little bit of background and a synopsis on this issue?
No, sir. Go ahead.
Okay. So I want to acknowledge Mr. Green and staff for assisting me with this, but I'm going to read just a brief statement that provides an overview of this process, not only for council's benefit, but more importantly for the community's benefit. And at the conclusion of my remarks, Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh, I would welcome comments from you as the council liaison to the Planning Commission, since this was considered and voted upon at our most recent meeting. So council members, a special land use permit allows a parcel of land or property to be used in a manner that deviates from the normally accepted activities in that area. In other words, the special land use permit creates exceptions to the zoning regulation, and city ordinances. An example of a special land use permit is where the zoning authorities allow a business to operate in an area that is not normally marked for such business activity, such as in a residential area. Another example is where a church is allowed to operate in an area otherwise marked for businesses. Special use permits are sometimes called conditional use permits. These permits are generally issued and overseen by local zoning bodies and authorities. Based on zoning ordinance section 9.04, special land use permits may be granted by city council after a public hearing and upon recommendation from the planning commission at its discretion. Included in your packet was the planning commission recommendation. It is now our duty to review the proposed special land use and determine if it meets our basis for determination as laid out in section 9.05 of our zoning ordinance. Our planning consultant, Carlisle Wortman, also provided a review of the application along with their comments. The proposed site plan in your packet was included as a reference point, but the site plan is still subject to review and approval by the Saline City Planning Commission. That is my statement. Mr. Gearbaugh, did you want to provide a synopsis or comment reference Planning Commission's discussion on this issue? Would be 2 weeks ago Wednesday.
Sure. The members of the commission discussed a number of issues with concerns related to the property, including aspects related to easements and purpose and use of the property. As you know, our master plan, which was adopted in March of 2017, indicated that property would be recommended for future land use to be office service, similar to what we had allowed on the corner of Woodland and Maple, which is the UAW hall, and also next door, which is the U of M clinic and some other offices that are in that property. I believe when the discussion was done and indicated, there were a number of other concerns in terms of just whether or not the rental of vehicles and other items, including supplies and so forth, actually fell underneath the use of that type of property, and in terms of what else was going on around in that area. As a result, the members of the commission voted unanimously not to recommend at this time a special use for this property due to the fact of the master plan and all the other concerns that were addressed as part of the meeting. I believe most of them provided some type of comment from their own personal perspective of how they saw what would be an appropriate use for this property at this time. We all recommend it can be redeveloped, just that this type of use at this point in time was not consistent with what surrounds it currently, including the courthouse. Sorry, I forgot about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh. We do have two guests on the line this evening, Mr. Butko and Mr. Brown. Again, I welcome you. We would be happy to entertain any comments if you have them this evening, gentlemen, before we open it up for questions and discussion.
Yes, this is David Braun. I'd like to make some comments and then turn it over to Mr. Butko to make some comments as well. I thank the City Council for having this meeting during this global pandemic. I hope everybody is well and safe. At the meeting, the Planning Commission meeting, we talked about the advantages of having a self-storage facility on the site, what that would provide to the city. I'd like to reiterate those advantages, if I may.
Please.
And then I'd like to address the recommendations that the Planning Commission made at that meeting. Some of the key advantages, and I wanted to create a win-win-win scenario for the city, the residents of Saline, and myself as a developer. You know, if the city put a modern storage facility on that site, it would increase the tax revenue for the city. It would put a nice professional-looking industrial facility that was current with the city's master plan, as I understood it, that it is zoned industrial. It would also create new jobs for people within the city, residents. It also would update the water treatment system from the 1970s. Not only would that site be brought up to standard, but the buildings, the office buildings next door, the bowling alley, all of that water treatment would be brought up to date. It really would give a better overall curb appeal. Right now, you have a house that is there that's from 1910 is when it was built, and you have an open field. Now, when I looked at that location, I went to the city and I asked them. At the time, it was Doug Lewan who was acting as the city planner, and then I talked to Mike Green, and they said that site had been proposed earlier for self-storage by a previous owner, and that they had decided, not to pursue that, but that was always a use that they thought would be good for the city. So I brought these key advantages up to the Planning Commission in our meeting, and Carlisle Wortman actually recommended that the site at the meeting be used for, a modern storage facility. They saw some changes, but they thought it was a good use for the site. And the Planning Commission kind of surprised me. I looked at, and I listened to them when they talked about, their vision of a master plan. They thought, my gosh, you have an office building right next door. You have the courthouse on the other side. I really think that it should be for office use. And so I went to Mr. Butko and I explained that to him. I said, look, I went to the city. I talked to them about it in our meeting. They thought it would be better for an office use. And Joe's comments to me were, David, I understand that, but, I'm kind of an expert in office buildings. I have a lot of office buildings in Saline. And in fact, I have the one right next door. You know that. He said, I do not see an office building as a viable business for that site. Meaning, I don't think you can get a good return on the investment. Not just me building it, because I wouldn't build it, but I've talked to others about it. And he said, David, what I would do is I would go back to the city and I'd talk to them about the challenges for that site. I'd share the advantages again, but then I'd also tell them what you told me. This site looks great from the road. I mean, it really does. And I was surprised there was not some.
I lost you, Mr. Brown. I'm sorry.
Population, all those things. But when I looked at the layout for the site and I tried to develop it, it had a lot of challenges. Mr. Mayor, it was a very narrow site. It has a very large retention on it. To build on that site, you would have to increase that detention pond right in the middle of the site to 1.25 acres. And then it narrows the use of the site even further. I had problems with my site engineer twice. We weren't sure we would be able to put a self-storage facility on it. And having developed, 30 other franchise concepts in my past life, when Joe told me, David, it's not going to be able to be built out as an office, you need to go back to the city, because I think this is a wonderful use. I agreed to do that. Even for me, putting a self-storage facility, or really a mod facility, because that's multiple uses, it's going to be, I don't want to say hard to put a storage facility on the site, but I'm going to have to work with the city so that I don't reduce the buildable square footage on the site too much, so that it can still be viable to be used for that purpose if you did decide to approve the special use. So what I'd like to do now is I'd like to turn it over to Joe Butko to give his thoughts on the Planning Commission's thought to make that office.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Brown. Mr. Butko, we welcome you this evening. The floor is yours whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, sir.
Okay, great. Well, from my standpoint, David really hit on most all of the the issues that I was really going to talk on. And I got personally involved in this site about a year and a half, maybe a little over a year and a half ago. Prior to that, the site was owned and managed by my father. And we've had several conversations over the years regarding this site and different interests that he's had in the site. The site's actually been on the market actively with Swisher since 2013. He's had a couple of interests in the site, but when people get digging into what needed to be done there to put anything of a professional office facility there, the numbers just didn't make sense. As David said, there's just not enough buildable area after you bring the detent pond up to standard to be able to put a facility with ample parking that justifies the cost. Somebody that's going to put a new facility in there would be faced with tearing down and cleaning up the old house and barn. They've got the cost of bringing the detent up to standard, which is extremely significant. Dave and I had a couple of meetings because we had to negotiate on the sale price because of issues that he was running into and making the project work. And I really wanted the project to work for him because I do believe with the type of facility he's talking about, it will be an attractive curbside appeal for that property. And going back to other developers that my father had talked to and worked with, they just couldn't make it work for them. And when David came up with his drawings and he showed what the bringing the detent pond to standard, the effect that had on the overall property, I met with a couple of developers myself just to kind of pick their brain. And the consensus was they just shook their head and they said there'd be no way that they would take that kind of a project on. It just doesn't make sense. You couldn't really even get a building the size of the University of Michigan Health System building that's next door. You couldn't really get a facility of that size onto that lot with parking. It is truly my hope that the city may reconsider David's plan. I think he's really hit on all the good points. It's going to improve the site significantly, make it a nice looking site from the road. It's going to increase the taxes for the city. It's definitely something that the city has a need for. David has shown me the documentation that he's got, or the study that he did showing the amount of storage facility use that's really needed in Saline, and the number's even greater than what he has proposed. I guess that is really all that I've got on it. I'd be happy to answer any questions that anyone might have regarding the property and its use, and even prior, things that were looked at.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Butko. And I would ask that all participating members this evening, if you're not recognized, if you would please mute yourself, because we are getting quite a bit of feedback this evening. Mr. Butko, Mr. Brown, we do appreciate your remarks. Before we open it up for questions, Assistant City Manager Green, anything else you would like to add?
No, sir. I think we got everything covered so far.
Okay. So again, I'm going to start with Councilmember Kamara Sulak and end with Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh. If you have questions at this time, please state the name of the individual that you're addressing and asking your question of, and we'll see what we come up with. So the chair recognizes Councilmember Kamara Sulak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, Mr. Butko and Mr. Brown. I read through the material and help me, is the house going to be updated and the curb appeal improved as part of the plan? This is for Mr. Butko or Mr. Brown.
Yes, it will be. Right now, I'm still analyzing the house to determine what needs to be done to it. But the plan would be in phase 2 to upgrade the house. For phase 1, we wouldn't be using the house. It would be more of a caretaker's house. But by phase 2, we would determine an appropriate use for it, whether it would become a storage building or a climate control building, or some other use on the site. It's a 1910 house. I have to have people really look into it and really investigate it to see what use I can use for it. That's why. That's why the delay.
Yeah, not an easy tell from the surface. So regarding the detention basin being enlarged to 1¼ acres, this is probably for Mr. Green. Is that accurate of what the requirement would be?
That's something I would have to check with Jeff or our outside engineering of OHM. But naturally, if you are building office that size, detention ponds are based on the surface area that's covered. So that would include a giant building like that and parking.
Okay.
So that could potentially be correct.
Where does the water run off from the health center, those buildings, and the bowling alley? Where does that water go to? There's a small basin there?
I can answer that. They both go. They both have piping in the middle of the first parcel, underground, directly into the detention pond, and those will need to be moved. So those will be upgraded and moved from 1970 standards to 2000 standards.
Okay.
And they will be moved around the buildings.
Okay.
That is one of the challenges.
Or the city's costs?
It'd be the developer's cost.
Okay.
Yes, it'd be our cost.
Okay, so based on the amount that it's been on the market for approximately 7 years, and looking at the shape of it, it seems like there's a lack of viable alternatives, especially from Maple. What did you base your study on for the need for additional self-storage? Was there a survey, an area survey completed?
They actually took demographics from the city and the location. The #1 building manufacturer and the leading building manufacturer in storage is a company called Trochty. And they actually have a site evaluation form. And it's based on the number of people in a city. And it's 7 square foot per person that determines the need. You also have to have a certain amount of traffic that passes the site. And then you also have to be able to lay out a certain number of square footage on the site properly. Those are the key demographics, among others.
Okay, and is one of the things that you looked at the location of that site being proximate and easy access from Maple and many residential developments, and it's not in an industrial park or further away? Was that a big consideration?
That was a consideration. In fact, having a mobile home park on that street also benefited. Having a lot of brand new developments in that area. Looks like not only are they under construction, but you have several that appear to be going under construction. It just, Saline is a very vibrant, growing community, and that was a big part of it. You're right.
Okay, and about how many new jobs do you anticipate in phase 1? In phase 1, it will be me. In phase 2 and 3, there'll be 4. Okay. And so there's a lot of infrastructure costs then in upgrading the water system and the curb appeal and a lot of pavement and increasing that detention pond. So that seems like a barrier. So it sounds like a highest and best use concern. So we're discussing if it's legally permissible. The other factors are if it's physically and reasonably possible, which it is, and then economically feasible. That seems to be the biggest question about alternate uses for the property based on its size, buildable area, potential uses, the fact that it's been on the market for 7 years and we've been in a really strong economy. And if you run all these numbers, it sounds like that meets the fourth leg of highest and best use being most profitable of the alternatives. And having having good tax revenue for the city and improving that parcel when maybe other uses, while maybe more consistent with the master plan, may not be as likely. I'm sorry. I guess I'm thinking out loud. I've probably gone to my 5 minutes, but.
No, and I think the thinking that you're doing out loud is exactly correct. I would need all 5 of those profit centers that I talked about in order to make the self-storage viable. And we'd have to work together to be able to do a modern self-storage facility. I mean, there is a way where if we do too much, I don't want to say beautification on the site because I want to make it look very good, but if we have to narrow or shorten buildings on that site, or if we have to take away profit centers, it would not make this use profitable as well. I do also want to point out to the city council that there is another standard coming up, it's going to happen by the end of this year, where that detention pond would have to be over 2 acres to meet the then new current standard. At the over 2 acres, I cannot make the modern storage facility work. And Mike and I think Mr. Fordyce could give better comments on that. I wanted to point that out to you as well.
Okay, I have another question. So this self-storage use, it's a low intense use. I understand there's no electricity. There's going to be very little detriment to the city. But is this a use? It seems like it would be a use that would not be impacted by the down economy. If anything, maybe homeowners won't be able to move up in their needs, or maybe not needs or wants, and would use self-storage as much or more as they might at other times. So is that your experience? Is that what you're anticipating, that there would be a strong demand for it, even though we're likely going into a COVID down economy for, I mean, it's up to speculation.
I would say to you this: it will take a little longer to fill it now that we're in COVID than I initially expected, for sure. But self-storage facilities in Saline are more than 90% full. And, I'm proposing a 70,000 square foot facility when the need is 230,000 in that area for storage. So I do think it's more recession resistance than most businesses. It would be tough to handle a depression or a really strong recession. But I think it has huge advantages over the vast majority of businesses, to answer your question.
Very good.
And that's very appealing to me.
All right. One last question for Mr. Green. How much improvement to the Maple Road entrance, the curb appeal, is required for phase one. I'm concerned if this goes forward that it will be, enhanced, and keep our city looking good, and that it blends in and doesn't stick out like a sore thumb. I mean, we want to improve. So could you answer that, please?
Yeah, so all of that, all landscaping and how it's going to look is all subject to site plan review. So if this was passed, this would go back to Planning Commission for that. And being a special land use, Planning Commission has a little more control of how the project could look. So if they're, since this is a 3-phase project, if Planning Commission decides they want to have the landscaping, especially on Maple Road first, done in phase 1, they can. So we have a little more control over that aspect. But yeah, in our zoning ordinance, we have a full set of landscaping guidelines that they have to meet.
Okay, so there's less risk to the city then.
Yes.
Okay, very good. I appreciate the extra time, Mr. Mayor, and I will end with that for now.
Excellent questions, Mr. Camaro-Sulak. Thank you. My ears may have betrayed me, but at the beginning of Mr. Camaro-Sulak's questions, did DPW Director, City Engineer Fordyce try to chime in on the whole stormwater management issue?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on that a little bit. The stormwater management in that area is outdated. There was kind of a combined shared detention pond that I believe serves the bowling alley, the U of M, the office complex that the U of M facility is in, and maybe a third one. And then it would also have to serve this facility. So there are definitely some challenges with the site associated with the existing stormwater management system.
Very good. Thank you for those comments. Councilmember Del Orco, any questions for the applicants or for city staff?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. My concerns with the proposal center on it not meeting the requirements of the city's master plan, and there seems to be some disagreement on that between our planning commission and our consulted engineers, Carlisle Workman. They specifically state that a special land use permit may be granted by City Council upon a recommendation from the Planning Commission at its discretion. And at this time, we are not getting a recommendation from our Planning Commission to move forward with this on the basis that it does not meet our master plan. And I was hoping, as a junior councilman, I have to give a fair bit of deference to our Planning Commission. I'm wondering if the Planning Commission had at its benefit the special land use review at the time that they contemplated and deliberated on this issue. And if either Pro Tem Gearbaugh or Mayor Brian Marl can comment on that, I would greatly appreciate it.
Mr. Gearbaugh, Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh, do you want to take the lead on this?
Sure. Yeah, all of this information was presented to each member of the Planning Commission. We have individuals that their backgrounds are in planning and so forth. They reviewed all of this. The one question they had was, why was the special use permit coming to them first before coming to council? But because of the way it works, you have to have them submitted at that point together, and the Planning Commission has to make its review and recommendation. So all this information was presented to them. They all had the ability to question our planner, Chris Atkins, and then also recommendations from Mr. Fordyce and Mr. Green at the time. So this information has all been reviewed by them, and at this time, that was their review.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gearbaugh. So obviously there's a little bit of tug and pull with Carlisle Wortman saying that this meets our city's master plan, and our planning commission saying that it does not. And for me, I have to go with the recommendation of our city's planning commission. I think they've done a fair bit of looking into the matter, and I am sympathetic to the notion that this property has challenges and that may or may not be attractive to other developers. But I have to believe with 6.42 acres of land, even considering that 2 acres of it could potentially be usurped by needing to modernize the detention pond, that there's still 4.42 acres to work with here. And I think things can be worked with, and it's probably difficult to develop, but that doesn't mean it's impossible. And because of the limited, extremely limited number of jobs that this would offer to our economy in the city of Saline, with only, I think you mentioned 4 jobs. I mean, you have a computerized kiosk, there's no manned buildings. I just don't really see the overall benefit to the city, and I'm certainly not in any kind of position to zone away from the city's master plan, especially not having the support of the city's planning commission. So I can't see myself being in support of this at this time unless the planning commission is willing to reevaluate the matter based on some additional information that's been provided. But from what I can see, I can't support it.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Delorco. Appreciate those. Councilwoman Mitchell, any questions or comments at this time for either staff or the applicants?
Just a few, Your Honor. As a general comment, I just want to disclose that I am a neighbor across the street from Mr. Butko. We don't have a personal relationship other than we wave and ignore each other if we're putting the garbage out in our GMEs. I was particularly interested in our packet, that's page 38. It contains an overhead map of the property and how it fits in. And I am sympathetic to this statement that because of the retention pond or detention area, it makes some of the use tough. So I guess I studied the zoning code to look at this. As Mr. Delorco said, I believe in the planning commission. I personally don't see a self-storage unit there. Just with the courthouse and the office buildings, I think that corner has a wonderful potential for advancement, and could be used, as sums adding to the whole. 4 acres is 4 acres. So right now, unless other information comes to light, I won't be supporting a special land use.
Thank you for your comments. Appreciate those. I'm up to Councilmember Seal.
Mr. Honor, I have several questions. First of all, if we would grant a special land use, what other uses are allowed under that special land?
Yes, sir. So the way, if you did allow the special land use, the recommendation would be to make the motion to allow the special land use for David Braun, conditional upon preliminary site plan. So if Mr. Braun ended up going away and the project fell through, the special land use would be void and just go away. So that's the way we would try to handle it. So the special land use would be specifically for self-storage on this property.
Okay, thank you. And then for the other gentleman, what's the timing of your 3 phases? I see you have 3 phases here. What would be the timing right now of those 3 phases?
The timing of the 3 phases would be 3 years. In the first phase, we would do most of the improvement. We would do all the grading. We would do all the landscaping. We would put the buildings that are in front, right there in front of in the front of Maple Road. So we would improve the frontage from the very beginning. Now, I would like to point out a comment on the site that I think is very important. If we walk away from this project today, I guess I look at it from Mr. Budko's standpoint. He's going to have a facility that right in the middle of it, you're going to have 2 acres taken right out of the middle that are going to be a retention pond. And I don't see any use, and I've represented 30 franchise brands in 30 years, actually 25 in 30 years, with all different uses. And there's not one that I could say that I would put on that site, except for a modern storage facility, with the caveat that I'd have to have all 6 of those profit centers that I asked for. I think this is a very tough project, site to find a use for. And as far as the master plan goes, when I talked to Doug Lewan and when Carlisle Wortman made their comments, they said, look, Planning Commission, it is zoned industrial. I don't know I know you want to change the master plan to office, but right now it's zoned industrial. They couldn't do office without rezoning the property. And that wasn't something that they recommended to the Planning Commission. You pay that consultant, Carlisle Wortman, a lot of money. And they said, look, I can't think of another industrial use for that site. And they said that directly to the mayor pro tem. It's zoned industrial. I can't see another industrial site. He said, I don't know enough about office. And Joe, I'd like Joe to chime in a little bit on the office use, but I don't see that happening. If Joe won't do it, he can't find other people to do it. I think you're going to have a field in a 1910 house for a very long period of time. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I'd love to do this facility and I'd like to help the city of Saline, but I can build it elsewhere in another community if that's really what you want me to do. I'm looking out for Joe in this standpoint. What you're going to do in the future with that, I'd love you to talk to him about it and how he can bring a nice facility to that site for the city of Saline.
Right, I don't mean to cut anybody short, but I was asking about the timing of the phases.
The timing of the phases is 3 years, and most of the beautification in phase 1.
All right, so the 23 spaces at the rear that go out to Woodland Drive, what would those be used for?
Those would be used for RVs. And actually, RVs would start in the middle of the property, and as I add buildings, RVs would be moved back to the Woodland Drive area.
I'm sorry, I don't understand exactly what you said, Mr. Brown.
Oh, so I'm sorry, maybe I broke up. But I would add the first 3 buildings in the front next to the house on the site plan.
Right.
And then I would park RVs in back of that. And as we added the buildings over the 3 phases, then the RVs would end up on the Woodland Drive area. And I think there's 23 spots for RVs right there.
Okay, so those would be open RVs out in the open there.
They would be, and they would also have fencing that would block them from view.
What kind of fencing is it?
It's a chain link fence, but it has special materials. It's like a woven material, and it's actually awesome for blocking out vehicles. It's better than the other storage facility in town, the U store. They have mesh on theirs. This is a mesh specifically designed for modern storage facilities, and we'd show a sample of those at later meetings.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's all I have.
Thank you, Councilmember CO. Councilwoman Dillon, any questions or comments?
Thank you. I do. I just have a couple. I'm going to start with Mr. Green. Just for clarification, I believe it was asked, but just my own. The special land use follows the land or the owner or the project?
It depends how you make the motion. So the recommendation would tie the special land use to the developer. So if you decided to go with it and you would make the motion to approve the special land use for David Braun, conditional upon preliminary site plan, if Mr. Braun ended up dropping the project, the special land use would go away.
Okay. So, but if he were to then modify it and instead of a use store, it turned into, say, all RV storage, that would still fall under this special land use?
I would have to review the zoning ordinance. If it technically fell within self-storage, then yes, but that would still have to go through Planning Commission site plan review, which probably wouldn't pass.
Okay. Okay. And so then I just wanted to clarify. So basically on this property, the proposed is storage units, which are inside storage units, vehicle storage, and then you're also proposing like a U-Haul type retail rental?
Yes, and shipping as well.
Okay.
There are certain percentages of people that if they cannot have the U-Haul rented, then they won't store in your facility. They'll just go to another facility that has a U-Haul rental, and then they'll store within that facility. Also with shipping, which is the fifth category, there are people now that work a lot like we are right here. They're remote. I have a gentleman that owns, a friend of mine owns a camera business, and he has 22 rental units in a storage facility, and he chose the storage facility because it had shipping. So what he does is he has 22 employees. Once a day they go there, they grab all the cameras that are sold online, and then they ship them right out of that facility. So all of these uses mentioned are what a modern storage facility offers. Some of the other storage facilities might not offer that.
Okay. So what is it that appeals to you about this particular property for this particular project? It seems as though this could be anywhere. It could be in an industrial park, but it looks like you're really pushing for a road, for a main thoroughfare type road, because it's not really a destination business. You're going to have your clientele. People are not just dropping by. So I guess with all of the challenges to this property, I'm just sort of surprised that you're still considering this versus something that would have fewer challenges.
Mr. Brown, are you still there? You muted?
Looks like he's dropped off.
I think we must have lost him.
I think so.
Why don't you, I bet he logs back on. Councilwoman Dillon, do you have additional questions either for?
Actually, and the other question I have is probably for Mr. Fordyce. Just to clarify, so was this whole corner at one point one parcel, and that's why there's one detention pond?
The detention arrangement here goes back quite a few years, and it is a kind of a creative shared solution that we would not allow today, but it was approved by Planning Commission at the time that it was done.
Okay, and so currently the only mechanism is to, like, those other properties have no area in which they can create their own detention ponds, correct? It has to still flow through these properties?
Correct, yeah. It would be exceedingly difficult to revise those systems now and find space for it.
Okay. Okay, well with that, actually, and the only other thing I wanted to do is just make mention that it does say in the Carlisle-Wortman report that that house, they were thinking about utilizing that as an office, which I have to say is much different than making it a climate-controlled storage facility. So I just wanted to make mention of that also. And with that, I'll move on.
Very good. Thank you, Councilwoman Dillon. Councilmember Gearbaugh, any questions or additional comments?
Just a question. Could you provide a little more history as to how this lot was carved out? I know there's two separate lots, and I think this proposal is trying to combine them. But what was the original history when this site was being developed, if you recall, Mr. Butko?
You know, I don't recall why they're two separate lots. That goes back well before my time of having any knowledge of that. And it was something that I didn't really even understand until after my father passed and I got this property, that it was two separate parcels. One thing I would like to be sure that everyone understands is it is 6.25 give or take acres. And if we say we're losing just a little over 2 acres in bringing the detent up to standard, that doesn't leave 4 developable acreage there. The land that's on the east side of the bowling alley is really useless for anything other than a drive. You're not left with enough land behind the bowling alley to do anything with. So you're really just stuck with about the area of where the home is now back to about where the old barn is. I just want to be sure that that we're not thinking that there's still 4 or 3.5 acres of developable site. It's not.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Bucko. Anything further, Mr. Gearbaugh?
Just from maybe a question for Mr. Fordyce. Although we're showing an open detention basin in this, could an underground type facility, similar to what we've done in a couple of the other developments, be used at this location?
Most likely, yeah. They're often interchangeable. It depends a little bit on the grade there. I think this is a fairly shallow pond, so how much underground storage you could get and still have enough cover over it to make that useful space. If you wanted to have pavement or parking over that, you need a certain amount of cover in order to make that structurally sound. That might be tight here because I think it is a relatively shallow pond.
And can you remind me, so whatever is done will have to include a number of easements and solutions to provide drainage for all the existing properties or just this one property?
So my recollection is that there is some form of stormwater easement for those existing properties already to discharge their water onto a separate parcel. I think those are in place from the original development. Probably need to be tuned up for drainage from this parcel and just make sure everything's tied up nicely.
So we'd have to work with at least whoever owns the other parcels, and I'm not sure where the ownership or whatever's on that. In addition, I know there were some concerns from planning, or not planning, but our planner, Carlisle Wortman, our consultant, that the location of the Phase 3 building was too far forward and would not necessarily be a recommendation from which they would see that being a way of developing it. But that, again, goes back to if was approved, it would be a planning commission's site plan review at that point in time. My only other comment that I wanted to make was one of the concerns, and Mr. Seal brought it up, was the storage of RV vehicles and things because of, I guess, concerns with hazardous materials and so forth. And that was one issue that was not clarified of how, gasoline and everything would be in the tanks or if they have to be drained out, and those procedures. So that was another concern that was a bit of an issue that had come up regarding the storage of vehicles on this property. And the last comment I would like to make is that there is significant impervious surface, and of course that generates a significant amount of water being directed, and I understand now why we would have to have a bigger detention pond. But my concern on this is, even when I look at some of the buildings that are constructed on the other lot, including the U of M facility or whatever, I'm not sure if this property, I don't know what would be the restrictions in terms of the parking and so forth for a building to be built on it. Yes, it doesn't allow for maybe a 70,000 square foot building, but it could allow for a 10,000 or 15,000 square foot building and still be allowed to be an office service approach. And the one thing, when I look at the planning commission's approach about the master plan, I think one of the concerns is that this property couldn't be used for industrial, and that the recommendation was that it would be brought forward to be allowed to be concerned and used for a purpose that would be appropriate for this type of area, consistent with what was near it. I agree, industrial is not appropriate use for this property at this point, but I'm not convinced that this type of impervious surface, number of outbuildings, RV storage, a retail type business, and all of that is a number of uses for this property, which doesn't appear to be consistent with the other activities that surround it. So that's where I'll leave it.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Gearbaugh. Staff care to make any other comments this evening? Mr. Green?
No, sir, I'm all set.
Okay. Mr. Bucko, thank you for your attendance this evening. I don't know if Mr. Brown is back on back on the Zoom meeting with us, but we appreciate his participation as well.
Thank you.
Yep.
Have a good evening.
Yep, hang tight with us. We might have resolution here and some clarity in just a few moments. So we do have a motion on the floor moved by Mitchell, seconded by Dillon to acknowledge receipt of the April 28th, 2020 memo from Assistant City Manager, Community Development Director Green. If there's no additional discussion on that motion, we'll proceed to vote on acknowledging receipt. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it and the motion carries unanimously. There are actually a litany of options before you. Approve, conditional approval, rejection, send it back to Planning Commission, postponement. What is your pleasure, my friends? Feel free to, anybody would like to offer a motion from the floor?
I'll move to not approve the special land use request.
Okay. That is a proper motion. It's been appropriately moved by Mitchell to not approve. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll
Second.
second the motion.
Seconded by Dillon. I'll start again with Councilmember Kamara Sulek. Any discussion on a motion to not approve?
No discussion.
Okay. Mr. Delorco, any discussion on a motion not to approve?
No discussion.
Okay. Councilwoman Mitchell, any discussion on the motion that you offered?
Just a point of information, that Mr. Bucko and I discussed this property, and he was hoping that we could understand a little bit more. And my understanding is that something was worked out with the city for the detention pond, and that's why that parcel is the way it is. So unless we have any evidence to the contrary, then the disadvantage of the land was properly dealt with. And it's, it's a shame. And I greatly appreciate the drawings and the time. I just can't support a self-storage unit with all the other issues and points of sale at this time.
Very good. Thank you, Councilwoman. Mr. Seal, any discussion on the motion?
Just a couple things, Your Honor. First of all, I'm persuaded by the recommendation of the Planning Commission. I served on planning for many years myself, and I understand all the thoughts and consideration go into this kind of a special land use request. So I respect the fact that they voted unanimously to not recommend this to City Council. That's the first thing. Second thing is, I'm not sure that the outdoor storage of a bunch of recreational vehicles along the backs of the buildings and bowling alley and up alongside out onto Woodland Drive is a great site appeal for the surrounding area and as an amenity in our industrial park necessarily. Those kinds of things, and then the fact that it's going to be developed in phases leads me to believe that this may or may not proceed as indicated by Mr. Brown. I'm going to vote against it.
Thank you, Mr. Seal. Councilman Dillon, any discussion on the motion that you seconded?
No, only just to make mention that according to these drawings, there would be 9 outbuildings on this property. I believe Mr. Green, can you confirm that? In addition to the house, whether it were to stay?
I believe there is only 7. I think what you're looking at is a dividing line between the buildings to kind of separate units.
Okay. Okay. So, okay, it's not going to persuade my vote at this time. So I just wanted clarification for that. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh, anything further you'd like to add?
At this time, I am discouraged that we aren't able to develop this property for the owner. And I think I would like to see our development director assist with looking at how maybe the city can address some of the concerns and issues with this. We've run into these similar problems with other lots, and considering the history with this and understanding what's going on with it, I believe that there is some possible other use for this, just maybe not as intense as what this is. And then understanding there are different ways to handle retention and so forth, that there may be a better use, but it is the idea of investment on it. And I understand that that will be up to whoever provides that kind of resources.
Thank you. I would echo those comments, Mr. Green, and perhaps we can have a discussion about this particular parcel at an upcoming planning commission, because I do want to look at how we can encourage development and sale of the land, and perhaps maybe look at a more traditional rezoning in the event that another business there's additional interest, in this parcel for redevelopment. So that's really all I have. If there's nothing further, we do have a motion on the floor moved by Mitchell, seconded by Dillon, to not approve the special land use request for Saline's self-storage facility. I'll call for a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. Thank you all. We'll move on to, actually, this should be noted as old business, or unfinished business. This is business item 20-59, biosolid hauling. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the April 28, 2020 memo from Wastewater Treatment Superintendent Wygowski, and to approve an award or not to approve the 3-year biosolid hauling contract to NutriGrow Environmental Services Incorporated of Charlotte, Michigan, and to authorize or not authorize the mayor to sign. Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh, would you be willing to acknowledge, approve an award, and authorize?
Move to acknowledge, approve, award, and to authorize the mayor to sign.
Very good. And Councilmember Del Orco, would you second that?
I second the motion.
Okay, very good. Again, we discussed this 2 weeks ago. Superintendent Wygowski, I believe you're on the line now. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yep. I brought this to you a couple weeks ago. We had Mr. Forshee, our attorney, review the contract language and improve that. So NutriGrow is our current provider of this service. They were the low bid. They provided excellent service. So I'm recommending that we re-up with NutriGrow Environmental Services.
Very good. Thank you. We'll start with Councilmember Kamara-Sulak. Any questions for our wastewater treatment superintendent?
No questions at this time.
Very good. Councilmember Del Orco, any questions?
No questions at this time. I think this contract is in a much more final draft version, and it's ready for your signature, Mr. Mayor.
Very good. Councilwoman Mitchell, any questions or comments?
I believe she's away from her conditions.
Councilwoman Mitchell, are you there?
I am, sir. I beg your pardon.
Oh, you're fine. Any questions or comments for Mr. Wygowski?
Nothing right now.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Seo, any questions or comments?
No questions. The only comment is I'm glad to see this come in a finalized form, or more finalized form than it was next.
Very good. Councilwoman Dillon, any questions or comments?
Just a comment, and I just wanted to say thank you to Mr. Wygowski. I know I had brought about some of the questions and concerns with the previous draft of the contract. I appreciate the time and effort by staff and city attorneys to review it and put it in this final form.
Very good. Thank you, ma'am. Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh, any comments or questions?
None at this time.
Okay. Very good. If you'd like to make any additional comments, you can raise your hand at this time. Otherwise, we'll proceed to vote. We do have a motion on the floor moved by Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh, seconded by Councilmember Del Orco, to acknowledge, approve an award, and to authorize. I'll call for a vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Wygowski. We move on to new business item 19-55, Fairdean Development Extension. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the April 20, actually, let's start with a motion to acknowledge receipt of the April 28th, 2020 memo from Assistant City Manager, Community Development Director Green. Councilmember CO, would you acknowledge receipt?
Yes, Your Honor, I would.
Okay. And Councilwoman Mitchell, would you second?
I will, sir. Second.
Very good. It's been properly moved and seconded to acknowledge receipt. Assistant City Manager, Community Development Director Green, do you want to provide a brief synopsis? And then I believe we also have the applicant on the participating in tonight's meeting as well. So we'd be delighted to hear comments from Mr. Farrell as well.
Yeah, so similar to last meeting, we have a developer seeking an extension on a site plan. So they have some more time to develop their property. So as Mr. Mayor mentioned, we have Damian Farrell on the call. He is from High Meadow Development LLC, and he's requesting a 1-year extension on the final site plan approval for the Fairdean condos, which is at 207 Monroe Street. And they're currently set to expire on May 30th, 2020. So this extension request would bring them to May 30th, 2021.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Green. Mr. Farrell, are you with us?
He's muted.
He needs to be unmuted.
There it is.
Mr. Farrell, are you there, sir?
I am.
Wonderful. Oh, it's good to see you this evening. I hope you and your family are well.
And yours too.
Very good. Would you care to make a brief comment regarding this request?
I think, clearly we got caught here in the COVID crisis with our construction. As you know, we started construction on site work, got the water line in. We're preparing to put other underground utilities in when we got hit by this. The big question right now is what the market's going to look like when we come out of this, and just how strong it is. So right now, my investment team are they're sitting and watching and waiting until we get some indication of what the strength of the market is.
Very good. Well, we appreciate that. We understand these are difficult times, and we appreciate your tenacity. As I've indicated to you previously, this is a project we very much would like to see expedited and completed because it will expand and diversify our housing stock and bring in additional revenue to the city of Saline. So appreciate your continued interest and know that we're willing to do what we can to support you and make your vision a reality. So questions, and please indicate whether your question is for the applicant, Mr. Farrell, or for the Assistant City Manager, Mr. Green, or any other member of staff. We'll start with Councilmember Kamara-Sulak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Green, this question's for you. Is there any downside to the 1-year extension versus like a 6-month extension? I guess I'm trying to understand if this is, are we going to come to a year from now and ask for another extension? Because this project has been going on for quite a while with the planning and a lot of changes to it. So yeah, we don't know how long COVID will affect things and what the market will do. So if you could elaborate on a year versus 6 months, or what the downside is and positive for the city.
Yeah, to me, there's not much downside. The 1-year extension request is the standard via our zoning ordinance. The last meeting, the 6-month was the request by the applicant. That's why we went with that. So this 1 year is standard. I don't see much downside, and based on conversations I've had with Mr. Farrell, they have foundation drawings for building 1 ready to go almost. So as soon as their team is ready to go, they can submit those and they'll be on their way. So if anything, this is buying them a little more time to just price this.
Okay. Then just one other question for Mr. Farrell, if you will. Can you remind me what is the price range for the properties in the development? Mr. Farrell, are you there?
Yep, you're muted again, Damian. There, you're good. You don't need to mute yourself. Go ahead.
Before the COVID crisis hit us, the prices were in the mid 350s to the low 400s.
Okay. Do you think that'll change based on obviously the limited information right now with with these delays?
I honestly have no idea.
That's not really a question.
State blogs have been watching urban landing sequencing for every single talk I can. All I know are the predictions are we are headed into a severe recession, somewhere between a chronic and a severe recession.
Okay.
That's all I can tell you right now.
Okay. Yeah, I wish it was different, for sure, for you and for all of us. So thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Kamara-Sulak. Councilmember Del Orco, any questions for staff or for the applicant?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I certainly understand the request for the extension. Obviously, these are circumstances beyond Mr. Farrell's control. No one could have predicted this, or we wouldn't have wished this upon anyone. So yeah, I don't have any general concerns with granting the extension. I do, however, have some concerns with, there's kind of two components to this. One of them is being COVID-19 and the pandemic and the recession, pending recession. But the other issue that was raised was a procedural lack of communication between our city engineer and the developer with respect to there being necessary changes to drawings made on the sanitary sewer hookups. And I found it concerning that Damien went for 3 months without knowing that those permits weren't being submitted to the state. And I certainly recognize that when you get into beyond final site plan approval, you run into things that you realize, oh, we can't do it this way. We need to make changes. And Mr. Fordyce was correct to point out that, well, you can't just do this on the fly as a field redesign. You need to resubmit drawings. But I want to try to understand better why there wasn't better communication between the developer and Mr. Fordyce. And Mr. Fordyce, if you could comment on that, I would greatly appreciate it.
Sure. So I was in regular contact with Mr. Farrell's consultant and the contractor on site, and it was that team that brought this recommended change to me. So I get my fault for assuming that was a process that the entire Farrell team had gone through to bring that to me. So when they brought that suggested realignment of the sanitary sewer, we had not submitted the drawings yet to the state. We hadn't started construction of the sanitary sewer. So I told them I need updated drawings to submit with the permit application. They argued that this could be a field change, and in my opinion was different. This is not a field change. We hadn't started construction on the sanitary sewer yet. And I have to certify that the drawings represent what we intend to build. So I can't certify a drawing that I already know is going to be changed before we even begun construction. So so I had the request into their consultant to revise the drawings, and after I received those revised drawings, I submitted them to the state.
I have a comment, if I may.
Please, Mr. Farrell.
I got a response from Jeff today. I haven't had a chance to read it, I'm afraid. Firstly, Jeff, if I'm wrong in any of my statements, I publicly apologize to you. But there are two glaring facts from my point of view. Number one, that information to submit the permit was sent to you right after we got site plan approval. And that could have been processed by your office and submitted, which would have meant that had we got our plan, our permit, we would have built it the more expensive way. Because those suggestions to change that were only made in late December, I think 21st of December, and your office had all that information back in October. To get that information from the consultant. I think to me, the other really glaring thing in all of this, and speaks to Mr. DeLorco's point for me, I am the representative of the development team. I am the architect. I'm the only person who's shown up in public representing this project. I am the contractor. Basically, I'm a one-stop shop. I would like to know why in all of that correspondence, never once was I included. Never once. You've also never returned my phone calls, you've never returned my emails, you've never returned my texts. Only on 2 occasions have you responded to my emails, and that's when I, in your words, I think it was diplomatically put forward my concerns 3 months after I found out that we were not even in for permit, a permit that ended up taking 5 months to obtain. Why shouldn't I be your primary point of contact? I am the person who controls the money. I am the person who knows every critical thing about the project, the budget, its schedule, everything. And yet, apparently, the consultants are the preferred people to deal with. I don't understand that, and I think it's wrong.
Your consultant and contractor are the people who are bringing these issues to me, so I'm dealing with them. Certainly, from any point on, I can copy you on anything you want.
Well, and let me make one comment, and I'll get back to Mr. Dell'Orco in the event that he has additional questions or concerns. But Mr. Farrell and I spoke, I believe, on March the 11th, right as we were entering into this critical period, and the economy was essentially shutting down, and the governor was issuing her stay-in-place order. And that's when we had a good conversation, and that's when Mr. Farrell asked me to process this request for an extension. And he and I talked about this specific issue, and I articulated to him at that time that we're an organization that strives for robust and proactive communication. And if we did not do that, our apologies. We don't always convey information that people like. We don't always give them the answer that pleases them, but we strive to do it in a timely manner. And to the best of our ability, we want to accommodate the folks that we serve. So again, Mr. Farrell, if we did not, as an organization, communicate as proactively and directly to you, our apologies, and we will strive for better in the future.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Dell'Orco, did you have additional questions?
Yeah, I just want to say that I sympathize with Mr. Farrell in the circumstance, because the reality is, even in the absence of the global pandemic, this lack of communication, where 3 months elapsed, where he was not aware of the situation that was delaying the project to move forward, likely would have precipitated to him to have to ask for an extension anyways. So that's a concern for me, and I want to make sure we facilitate good communication with our developers as much as possible. The only other thing I would add, as I said before, Mr. Farrell, I'm going to vote in support of granting the extension, but I'm hoping maybe there's something that can be done to improve the aesthetics of this site while you're waiting to get things in place and evaluating the impact of the recession. I don't know if you can rebalance the land in any way. I don't know if that's cost prohibitive, but we have a foundation imprint with standing water in it. We've got a mound of dirt that's over 20 feet tall, and I don't know if there's anything that can be done to improve the site while we're in this holding pattern, but I just ask if that's maybe something we could consider.
That is a difficult situation. The amount of soil obviously is largely topsoil to be redistributed once the project is complete and to be used as backfill around the buildings. Yes, it's really unfortunate about the foundation. You know, that was already and our contractor was ready to go that week. Then we got shut down. You know, from here on out, anything getting bulldozers back on site, moving soil means we're going to have to re-scrape it, put it back, and all of that. You know, bulldozers, you know, that's $600 odd an hour when those things run. Yeah, it's expensive for sure. And right now, you know, it's such an unknown situation that to start to incur lots of additional costs, which, as I pointed out in my earlier email, we'd already done, you know, extra money to put further road base down to get to that situation. I will talk with Higgins and I'll talk with our site contractor. The mound is the critical one because there is select soil. Unfortunately, to redistribute that, come back and pull it back up again, I know it's not a pretty thing. I get it. and I'm very empathetic to your concern there, but the cost of that is really high.
I suspected as much. And I appreciate your honesty. I just thought I would ask. That's all I have.
Thank you, sir. Councilwoman Mitchell, any questions or comments for either staff or the applicant?
No questions. I just want to also apologize. This is not the expectation of how businesses run in the city. I'm completely supporting a one-year extension.
Very good. Thank you. Councilman Seo, any questions or comments?
Again, given the totality of the circumstances, I believe it's an appropriate thing to do to extend this site plan for 1 year.
Very good. Councilwoman Mitchell, any questions or comments?
Oh, you already hit me.
Oh, I'm sorry. I meant to say Dylan. My apologies.
That's okay, thank you. We're next to each other on the screen, so maybe.
You are.
So just very quickly, Mr. Farrell, so are you sort of at a standstill right now until you get your infrastructure done? Because I believe you made mention that you do have structure that's ready to be set.
Everything hinges right now on the market.
I'm sorry?
Sorry, everything hinges right now on the market.
On the market, okay. And so now with the governor's executive order and construction reopening on Thursday, how does that impact your project? Is there an avenue in which you are going to be bringing forth workers? And I guess here's my question to you, and I'll be frank about it. I don't want to see the one-year extension be a wait and see what the market does. I'd like it to be that you are actively working on this project, because as someone else did mention, I don't want to see in 1 year you come back and say, well, we took a pause, we weren't sure about the market, now we need another extension to actually build. So I do want to make sure that there is forward motion within this year extension.
There's not a single person on my team who wouldn't like that as well. We've been at this since 2014. So, but it does depend on the market. I don't know how else to tell you that other than to be forthright about that.
I'm very sorry. I'm having a very difficult time hearing you, and I unfortunately have my speaker at maximum volume.
I don't know how to tell you anything else other than it is dependent on the market at this point. If we open, if construction, yes, we'll go back in on the 7th. But if there are no sales in Saline, if the mortgage market changes dramatically, if the sales market changes dramatically, why would we continue to build a product that we can't sell and invest $10-some million and then sit on it? I mean, that's an even worse situation for me and for you. So I sincerely hope that the market rebounds, or at least does a gradual recovery. That's what we're all hoping for. But I'm sitting listening to the pundits who are saying we're in for a recession. And you know as well as I do what happened in 2008. I know it's a different kind of recession. But if there's no market to buy your units, would you continue and spend millions of dollars immediately?
Okay.
I just can't forecast it.
Okay.
So
just to clarify, I'm sorry. So just to clarify, then, the extension in which you're asking for, as much as there was an issue with permitting, you're looking to pause because of the current market situation.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, I appreciate that. Maybe this would be for Mr. Campbell. Mr. Campbell, where does that stand then in the agreement? Where is the penalty clause with the extension? Does it just move out 1 year?
Mr. Campbell, are you there?
Yes, I'm just trying to locate the.
Todd, there's one on page 82 of the packet, section C, completion of construction.
Yep, completion, yep, exactly. So there's additional, buyer agrees that all construction development of the property shall be completed within 24 calendar months of the date for beginning of construction. Given the delays to date, buyer agrees that if the buyer fails to complete all construction and development of the property within that time, including but not limited to completion of all 30 units and all other items set forth in Exhibit A, buyer shall pay to the city within 30 calendar days a written request from the city an additional $35,000 for the purchase price of the property, and the city shall have any and all other remedies provided. I mean, this is extending that out so that they cannot incur that additional $35,000.
Right. So that just, all that date is going to do is move out 1 year, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And it's just 35,000, correct? That's the only penalty at this point?
That is correct.
Okay. Okay. And has, I assume that Mr. Farrell at this point has met the burden of beginning construction?
Yes, it's my understanding.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Dylan, can I add something?
Please.
In the meantime, we have continued with our permitting process. As I don't know if you're aware of this, but modular construction requires a state permit.
Okay.
So the drawings for building 1 have been submitted to the state has a consultant who does a pre-review of the drawings. Those drawings were submitted about 8 weeks ago to that company for their pre-review. They will automatically go to the state from there. So we are keeping going with our permitting process as if we are going to start, so that we are ready when we feel the market is strong. We do have a subcontractor lined up. As I mentioned, we have a contract signed for the foundations for building 1. That work was literally going to begin the week after COVID, after the shutdown on, I think if I'm remembering correctly, March 24th.
And Mr. Kim, I just wanted to end with one last thing. It's sort of to piggyback on what Mr. Del Orco had said, which is sort of the site of the site. And I understand that moving earth may not be a possibility, but I do have great concern about standing water, especially as we're coming into summer season with mosquitoes and such. And I know that I believe the detention pond is in some aspects in place. And at one point during heavy rains did have quite a bit of water in it. Is there a way that can be monitored and either safely evacuated from there so there are no standing water hazards or areas in which there could be mosquitoes during this period of time when there's no activity on that property?
Yeah, so we'll, through I guess the combination between community development and DPW, we'll try and work with Mr. Farrell and see what we can do for the safety and well-being, right, of the neighbors. I mean, in addition to at minimum securing that area, if there's any significant water issues that pose a risk, but also to your point about the mosquitoes, certainly could be a concern as well. So we will certainly work with them on that and see what we can do to make it resolve any safety and health issues.
Is there any way that property can be quasi fenced off? I know that last year, because it obviously sits next to People's Park, kids found those massive dirt piles a great place to play. There were people walking their dogs through that property, and I don't think that people understand that is private property and that it could be dangerous to be on there. I don't know what's on that property, and I would hate for somebody to think that they can pass through it and have something terrible happen.
Certainly, I mean, we could also work with the owner, with Mr. Farrell, simply some signage potentially. But yeah, we can work with them to see what we can do to make it a more user-friendly, if you will, site that's more conducive to the health and safety of our residents.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh, any questions or comments?
No questions. I just, by your last words, Mr. Farrell, was encouraged by that, understanding that you continue to move forward on this project. We were all looking forward to it to be completed, and unfortunately, this COVID did throw everyone off, and that a one-year extension seems appropriate. And it's also helpful to understand that the additional approvals that you have to go through for the modular foundation, I didn't understand that that was such a requirement. There's been a lot of things going back and forth over the years and delays and such. And so at this point, I'm glad that you're continuing to make this move forward and that we will see this finished, hopefully, within a year or 18 months. Thank you again for working with us.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Farrell, thank you again. We appreciate your patience and your time this evening. As things move forward, please keep my office in the loop. We've always had a good rapport and I think have communicated effectively in the past. And of course, if I can be helpful in any way, let me know. And because there's some interest from council members and the community, when construction activity begins again, if you would notify us so we could disseminate that information, that would be much appreciated.
You'll be the first to know, I promise.
Very good. Thank you, sir. Well, I'll offer a motion then to approve the Fairdean Development Extension to May the 30th, 2021. Council Member CO, would you actually, excuse me, we didn't vote on the initial motion, so I take that back. Getting late. We have a motion on the floor moved by CO, seconded by Mitchell to acknowledge receipt. Unless there's anything further, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Say nay. Ayes have it. Now I'll offer a motion from the floor to approve the Fairdean Development Extension to May 30th, 2021. Mr. CO, would you be amenable to seconding that?
I would.
Very good. Motion on the floor moved by Morrow, seconded by CO to approve. Councilmember Kamara-Sulak, anything further?
Nothing further.
Okay. Mr. Del Orco, anything further?
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Okay. Councilwoman Mitchell, anything you'd like to add?
Yes, Your Honor. Can you describe, so there's water in a foundation, is that what's happening at the property right now?
I'm not aware of any water. Perhaps Mr. Farrell or Mr. Green from Community Development could address that.
Yeah, just in very general terms, it's essentially it's essentially just standing water on a construction site, similar to if you were doing yard work and you had a lot of dirt in your own yard and you just had standing water there. That's the gist of what's going on.
Is there water in a foundation? Like, is there a poured foundation? No. Okay. All right. That's all I was wondering. I would like to see something worked out as far as mosquito control. And I too am concerned for the neighbors. They've had to look at a construction site for a long time. And I would also support having it marked as a construction site and having some kind of fencing, some kind of tape, so that residents are aware. I will be supporting the motion.
Very good. Thank you. Councilmember CO, anything you'd like to add?
Nothing, Your Honor.
Councilman Dillon, anything you'd like to add?
Not at this time.
Okay. And Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh, anything you'd like to add?
Not at this time.
Very good. One question for you as a follow-up, Mr. Farrell. Do you have any aversions, or would it be difficult to put up some signs that indicate to folks that it's private property and they should not trespass on an active construction site?
No, not at all. I'm actually meeting with my construction manager tomorrow morning. We'll get on that right away.
Very good. Excellent. We appreciate your attention to that. There is a motion on the floor moved by Morrow, seconded by CO to approve. If there's nothing further, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. Thank you again for your time, Mr. Farrell.
Thank you all.
Yep. We move on to the discussion portion of our committee. First up is commission, committee, and task force reports from council. Mr. Kamara-Sulak, any commission, committee, or task force reports?
Yes, the Saline Youth Council, we met and kind of caught up on how everybody was doing. I think the students are doing well considering the COVID challenges. And they had a really good idea to get some positive, cheerful snail mail to the Linden Square Assisted Living Facility. I think is a really good idea to try to brighten their days there. So they are moving forward on that. And then the only other thing is that they decided to continue to meet on a monthly basis through the summer to try to build the council and just stay in contact, and also brainstorm further ideas that they can do to help the community and stay busy. So I'm really proud of these young leaders in their efforts.
Yeah, that's excellent. Thank you for sharing that. Very good. Councilmember Del Orco, any commission, committee, or task force reports?
Not at this time. My commissions and committees have yet to meet, but I think we're going to be moving in that direction this month. So hopefully I'll have something more soon.
Excellent. Councilwoman Mitchell, any commission, committee, or task force reports?
Yes, Your Honor. I'm happy to say that the Historic District Commission is going to meet this coming Wednesday. I think the timing is important because as construction is open, people are naturally going to want to do some work on their homes. We don't have anything special with the exception that this month is Michigan Preservation Month, and normally we would be having some events and some walking tours. So I encourage people to get out and look at our beautiful historic district and look at our prospective district as well. The city has been awarded help from the state to establish a new historic district, and that's pretty exciting, that we can keep some of these structures for generations to come and to contribute to the community. Thank you.
Good, very good. Councilmember Seal, any commission, committee, or task force reports?
None, Your Honor.
Okay. Councilwoman Dillon, any commission, committee, or task force reports?
I do. Very quickly from the Parks Commission, I just wanted to remind the public that our park use is limited to walking, running, biking, hiking. Park equipment, including ball fields, still remain closed. And to please remember to take your trash with you. City trash cans have been removed in an effort not to spread germs. So if you produce trash, please take it with you and dispose of it properly. And also the Green Thumb Awards are going to be postponed a little bit till we make sure that it's a safe time to be out and about at people's properties. But please go ahead and start getting those gardens ready.
Very good. Thank you for that. Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh, any commission, committee, or task force reports?
No, we pretty much discussed all the planning commission issues tonight, so all set.
Very good. Then let's move on to reports and other announcements. First, not to steal any of Councilwoman Dillon's thunder, but I know she's messaged on this, and so has Councilwoman Mitchell. Mr. Campo, perhaps by the conclusion of business next week, because I anticipate the governor making some additional announcements, probably in advance of May the 15th. Can we get provided in writing to City Council your leadership team's plan for reopening city government, specifically City Hall, other operations, including the recreation complex? Again, I know there's going to be some things that evolve in the next 7 to 10 days, but that would be helpful information for City Council to have and then subsequently to disseminate to our constituents.
Certainly, Mayor. My hope is to possibly have it sooner, but certainly by then. Our leadership team, as Council may recall, we meet 3 times a week, and we actually are poised to discuss in greater detail this coming Wednesday. I know all the departments have been working on what we call our reentry program, and so what I've asked is that our team to provide that information, at least what they have thus far, to me by tomorrow. And then we will be reviewing that at our leadership team to see what any more details that we may need to come up with, or you know, where we're at. Because again, I know the departments have been working on those reentry plans.
Very good. Thank you. Councilwoman Dillon, I don't know if you have anything else you'd like to add to that. Do you want to discuss your proposal reference our currently scheduled work meeting on the 11th?
Yes, thank you very much. I've done a lot of consideration. I think we've all seen the SAGE report. It's 200 plus pages. It's a lot of information. It's a lot of data. I think at this point, we have missed our window to utilize that information in this budget cycle. I don't think it's about dollars. I think it's about a more holistic view of staffing. And so it would be my preference that at this point, we postpone our presentation from SAGE and look more at after budget cycle. I know we also want to get back into our sitting study from wastewater. I think those really need to be our priorities right now. I'd like to be able to look at the SAGE report and concurrently look at the organizational review together with our current organizational chart, because I think all of those pieces need to be integrated and see where things shake out, basically. And I don't see that as being right now spending 1 hour of time on the SAGE report and then leaving it sit for a while till we can get back to it. I'd rather look at all that information in its totality. So I am suggesting that at this point, we postpone.
Yep. So just so that I'm clear, and I have no objections, so we would still be meeting on the 11th. It would just be to continue our discussion on the proposed 2020-2021 budget, correct?
Correct. Yes.
And again, I have no objection. I think, as I indicated to Councilwoman Dillon earlier this afternoon, I think realistically, if the consensus is to postpone the SAGE presentation, we would be looking to do that sometime in July or late June. My priority, of course, being the budget that we have to approve and develop consensus on this month per charter and, of course, per state statute. But subsequently, we need to revisit the operations at the wastewater treatment plant and the future of wastewater services in the city of Saline. And so that's going to be a primary focus for this group in June. Councilmember Camaro-Sulak, do you have any objection to Councilwoman Dillon's recommendation?
No, I like the recommendation. That makes good sense. So,
okay. Very good.
Agree with that.
Councilmember Del Orco.
I'd like to underscore Ms. Dillon's comments at this time, and I support them as well.
Very good. Councilwoman Mitchell.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. I think it's a sensible and sound approach. There's no use in doing anything halfway. So I'd support that 100%.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Seal.
I'm in total agreement.
Okay, I'm assuming you don't have anything to add, Councilwoman Dillon. Councilmember Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh.
No, it's appropriate this time. We just don't have the time to review it appropriately for this budget season.
Mr. Campbell, so if you would notify SAGE that we'll be getting back in touch with them and we'll find a time for them to present sometime later this summer.
Very good. Thank you.
Yep. Other reports or announcements. I'll end by reading these two resolutions as requested by Councilwoman Mitchell. I'll start with Councilmember Camaro-Sulak. Do you have any other reports or announcements, sir?
No, I do not. Well,
Okay.
I do have one.
Please.
Are we still having the wastewater treatment update?
Yes. Yeah.
All right.
That'll be.
I would like us to have some sort of a format for these updates so that it makes sense, and like we've talked about before, so that it's in layman's terms for us to understand better, and build upon our limited understanding of the technical aspects of the wastewater treatment plant and the number of different moving parts. So I'd like to see some sort of a reporting format that we could help Mr. Wygowski, provide the information that is most helpful to us and streamline the amount of time that he spends on the item. So I might have been able to say that in his update, but I want to make sure that I didn't forget that.
Yeah, I actually think it's a good idea, Councilmember Kamara-Sulak, and that was another issue that Councilwoman Dillon and I discussed earlier this afternoon, and I don't mean to steal any of her thunder, but I think there are ways in which we can improve and strengthen his written report that is provided to council in advance of each of our meetings. So one of Janet's suggestions that I thought was excellent is perhaps folks could email me or provide me in writing what sort of issues you think, what the deficiencies are in those written reports now, and what more information that you would like to receive. That would be great for my benefit, and then to pass along to staff. So again, we can strengthen that document so you get the information that you need and subsequently can disseminate to the people that you represent. Mr. Delorco, any other reports or announcements?
Not at this time.
Okay, Councilwoman Mitchell, any reports or announcements?
Just a question, Your Honor. When are we meeting again to discuss the replacement of wastewater treatment plant infrastructure?
My hope is that we can have a work meeting, that first meeting in June, to revisit the future of wastewater services in Saline.
Okay, thank you, Your Honor.
Yeah, and just to know, we're meeting on the 11th to discuss the budget. We have a work meeting scheduled for the 18th to discuss the budget, and then that following Monday, of course, is Memorial Day. But I do want to leave that subsequent week open in the event that there's still discussion and debate over the budget.
Agreed. So, thank you. Thank you, Your Honor.
For the budget. Councilmember Seal, any other reports or announcements?
No, but because wastewater has been brought up by my previous speakers, I guess I'm not sure whether the two new council persons have been afforded an opportunity to tour the wastewater plant, but I would encourage them to do so if they haven't done so already, towards the end of helping them understand exactly what the flow and the process is down there.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I believe both of them have toured the facility. If they have not, please reach out. Yeah, please reach out to staff, and if you'd like to go again, you're more than welcome to do so. Right. Thank you, Mr. Seal. Councilwoman Dillon, any other reports or announcements?
Oops, sorry. The only thing is that, and it'll fall under probably wastewater, is that I wanted to make sure that we do acknowledge that we've received some complaints about the noise issue at the plant. So if Mr. Wygowski can just address that during his portion is fine.
Yep, very good. And as you may have seen in an email earlier today, I also asked him to revisit the whole privacy fence issue with some data at our subsequent meeting in 2 weeks. So we will have we will revisit that issue in 2 weeks' time. Mr. Gearbaugh, any other reports or announcements?
No.
Okay, very good. Well, then let me read the two resolutions that were approved earlier this evening. I'm starting with National Public Works proclamation. It starts here, and this proclamation would cover the days of May the 17th through May the 23rd, 2020. Whereas public works professionals focus on infrastructure, facilities, and services that are of vital importance to sustainable and resilient communities and to the public health, high quality of life, and well-being of the people of the city of Saline. And whereas these infrastructures, facilities, and services could not be provided without the dedicated efforts of our public works professionals, our engineers, managers, and employees at all levels of government and the private sector, who are responsible for rebuilding, improving, and protecting our nation's transportation, water supply, water treatment, soil waste systems, public buildings, and other structures and facilities essential to our citizens. And whereas it is in the public interest for the citizens, civic leaders, and children in the city of Saline to gain knowledge of and to maintain a progressive interest in the understanding of importance of public works and public works programs in their respective communities. And whereas the year 2020 marks the 60th annual National Public Works Week, sponsored by the American Public Works Association, Canadian Public Works Association, be it now. Resolved, I, Brian Marl, do hereby designate the week of May the 17th through the 23rd, 2020 as National Public Works Week. I urge all citizens to join with representatives of the American Public Works Association the Canadian Public Works Association, and government agencies in activities, events, and ceremonies designed to pay tribute to our public works professionals, engineers, managers, and employees, and to recognize the substantial contributions they make to protecting our national health, safety, and quality of life. In witness thereof, I have hereto set my hand and seal to this document done at the City of Saline, Michigan, the 4th day of May, 2020. And subsequently, the proclamation for National Police Week 2020. Whereas the Congress and President of the United States have designated May the 15th as Peace Officers Memorial Day and the week of May the 15th, and the week in which May the 15th falls as National Police Week. Whereas the members of the law enforcement agency of the City of Saline play an essential role in safeguarding our rights, freedoms of the City of Saline. And whereas it is important that all citizens know and understand the duties, responsibilities, hazards, and sacrifice of their law enforcement agency, and the members of our law enforcement agency recognize their duty to serve the people by safeguarding life, property, and by protecting them against violence and disorder, and by protecting the innocent against deception and the weak against oppression. Whereas the men and women of the law enforcement agency of the City of Saline unceasingly provide a vital public service. Now, therefore, I, Brian D. Morrow, Mayor of the City of Saline, call upon all patriotic, civic, and educational organizations to observe the week of May the 10th through the 16th, 2020, as Police Week, with appreciation ceremonies and observances in which all people may join in commemorating law enforcement officers past and present, who by faithful and loyal devotion to their responsibilities have rendered a dedicated service to their communities, and in doing so have established themselves as an invaluable, and enduring reputation for preserving the rights and security of all of our citizens. I further call upon all citizens of the City of Saline to observe May the 15th as Peace Officers Memorial Day in honor of those law enforcement officers who, through their courageous deeds, have made the ultimate sacrifice in service to their community or have become disabled in the performance of their duty. And let us recognize and pay respect to the survivors of our fallen heroes. In witness thereof, I have set my hand and seal to this document, the City of Saline, on the 4th day of May, 2020. Thank you very much for the opportunity to read those resolutions. If there are no additional reports or announcements, I did want to announce, or I did want to share some remarks to reference the city manager's annual evaluation. So I will instruct the city clerk to place hard copies of our evaluation form in your City Hall mailbox. Also, before the close of business tomorrow, Eleanor Getzman will be emailing you an electronic copy of the evaluation form, along with copies of the 2019, 18, and 17 evaluations, as well as a summary of the rankings and responses. Again, you should receive those before the close of business tomorrow. We have not yet received the city manager's self-evaluation. I hope to get that before the close of business this week. As soon as we receive a copy, you'll be provided a hard copy in your mailbox as well as an electronic copy. The tentative goal is to conduct the city manager's evaluation at our first meeting in June. And in talking with Eleanor Getzman, that means we would like your evaluation forms provided to us, specifically to Ms. Getzman, no later than 5 p.m. on May the 21st, May the 21st, so the data can be compiled and the spreadsheets can be provided in your packet the week before our June 1st meeting, which it would be May the 27th. Are there any questions for me regarding the city manager's annual evaluation? And I'm happy to speak offline if you have additional thoughts or concerns. Mr. Kamara-Sulak, any questions?
No questions at this time.
Okay. Mr. Del Orco, any questions?
I'm sure I'll have them once I see the forms, but not knowing what they look like, none at this time.
Okay, very good. Councilwoman Mitchell?
Your Honor, I think I wrote Ms. Genschman a note last year questioning the accuracy of some of the scores, and she wrote back that the scoring system on our review was incorrect. And I was wondering if she could make sure that the scoring system is accurate.
Yep.
Thank you.
The other thing I would note, reference the scores, is when you get the form, especially for our new members, if you feel you do not have sufficient data to provide feedback or to provide a ranking, you are always welcome to just leave an area blank. Obviously, we want you to make informed decisions, and if you don't feel at this juncture in your tenure you have sufficient data, feel free to leave a section blank if you deem that necessary and appropriate. Councilmember Seal, any questions about the city manager's annual evaluation?
None, Your Honor.
Okay. Councilwoman Dillon, we discussed this earlier today, but any questions?
No, not at this time. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Gearbaugh, Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh?
None.
Okay. Okay, then we'll move on to Andalina Farms. Just very briefly, I wanted to get consensus from council on this. So obviously, we took action in March to not proceed with a development agreement and annexation proposal in light of recent events, specifically the governor's stay-in-place order and ceasing all construction activity, and that was the right decision at that time. However, at this point, my personal feelings are that legal counsel should reach out to Andalina Farms representatives, specifically Alan Green and his associates at Dykema, to express an interest that the city of Saline would be willing to start again with the negotiation process, with the possibility that the parcel could be brought into the city of Saline and utilities could be extended. Now, realistically, I think Alan Green and his associates and client at MI Homes will respond one of three ways, which is first, yes, we would like to enter into negotiations again. Two, no, we would like to pursue a private development with private utilities and remain in Saline Township. And I think the third and most likely option is we need time to evaluate and assess the lay of the land, and we'll get back to you. But from an environmental, land management, and growth perspective, I still believe ideally it's in the best interest of the community that that parcel be brought into the city of Saline if possible. It may not be at this juncture, but if possible, I think that would be ideal. I also believe that we as an organization have invested considerable time and money, and I would like to take one more or make one more overture to Andalina Farms, specifically MI Homes, to see if we could broker some sort of deal. So at this juncture, all I'm looking for is approval to send a communique saying we're willing to negotiate and hear your thoughts. And obviously, depending on how they respond, would have to be brought back to City Council for review and consideration. Mr. Gearbaugh, I probably should start. I called on you, Mr. Gearbaugh. I should have started with Mr. Kamara-Sulak, but do you have any thoughts on that?
I agree. I think we put enough effort into this. We still have the concerns about that potential separate sewer plant and discharge that would run through Huntington Woods. We're not only looking at, our city's growth, but also protecting our citizens. And at this point in time, just to say no to it and walk away from what was truly a incredible agreement and providing money that most developments would never do in any other situation, I think would be a mistake. So I agree with you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Councilwoman Dillon?
Sorry, I was having a hard time unmuting. I do echo what you said, that I think that I would like to leave the door open to negotiate with the caveat that we are not currently in a position to actively pursue. So if the timing were to work for both the city and that developer, and we could make it mesh, then I would definitely want to pursue it.
Yeah. But you're comfortable at this time sending some sort of communique to their representatives?
Yes, I am.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Councilmember Seal, any comments or thoughts?
I totally agree with you and Mr. Gearbaugh and Ms. Dillon. I think that we've opened the door far enough already, spent enough time and effort on it that it makes good sense to do so.
Okay, very good. Councilwoman Mitchell, any thoughts?
I do not support using more attorney time at this point. I think during our budget discussions, Mr. Kamara-Sulak talked about the large overage in lawyer fees that we have. And I'm also concerned about the status of our current wastewater treatment plant. Not all of my questions have been answered. I would need more information, detailed information about capacity. If we had a newer plant, or if 3/4 of it had been replaced, I would totally be willing to talk about Andalina. I think we don't even have a plan. There's not a shovel in the ground. And I think it's just time to focus on the basics right now and not put the burden of growth on our current residents before we have guaranteed the infrastructure we have is in good working order. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Del Orco?
I'm kind of taking my cues from Mr. Farrell's position in that there is no way possible that a man in his position would invest millions of dollars not knowing if there's a viable market for the investment. And I have to assume that's on the minds of many people with projects in the pipeline. And that would extend to the folks with Grand Saqua, Lair Farms, as well as MI Homes at Annalena Farms. And a number of issues have come to light with respect to the capacity and functionality of our current wastewater treatment plant. And I feel it's in our best interest at this time to focus on preserving and restoring our wastewater treatment plant to meet the needs of our current residents and not overburden ourselves with worrying about what's going to happen with Annalena Farms. I do appreciate the amount of effort that's gone into this and securing the annexation of this development. I do think it's a good idea. I would hate to see a private water treatment plant go up on that site for the myriad of reasons. But in light of everything that's happened with our water treatment plant, I want to keep the focus on dealing with that issue.
Okay. Thank you. Councilmember Kamara-Sulak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have serious reservations about moving forward. I understand it's just an email to them, but I don't think there's any need to hurry with doing this, and our time is better spent focusing on our current taxpayers and their needs and the issues that we have with the wastewater treatment plant. And as my colleagues have said, you know, the infrastructure and those issues and the COVID and the down market that's on the horizon. So I think we need to keep our focus on our current infrastructure and residents. I don't think Annalena Farms is going anywhere anytime soon. So I don't want to be distracted by it. So I don't think it's necessary at this time to go to them and ask if they're interested. I think it's kind of telling that they haven't contacted us on anything. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Yeah, very good. Well, we're a little bit split down the middle, but I do have 4 votes who are amenable to reaching out. And I would preface too by saying at this point, all I'm requesting is a narrative being provided to Alan Green and his associates, just saying we're amenable to negotiating and hearing your thoughts on the matter, and any subsequent action would need to be debated and considered and subsequently approved by City Council. So, Mr. Campbell, do you think you have clarity on the issue?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Very good. Mr. Wygowski, are you still there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Do you want to provide us a wastewater treatment plant update, and then we'll entertain questions and comments from the group?
Yeah, I'll briefly go through the bullet points on my update, and then I'll answer any questions or attempt to answer any questions that you have. First of all, the water treatment plant. The water treatment plant is operating well. I've contacted H2O Towers. They're the company located in Saline that is going to paint the industrial drive water tower. They were unsure if they were going to get a contract in Georgia before they're currently located in Florida. And they may have a tower to paint in Georgia, and then they're going to come back to Michigan. And they thought that we would be the first tower to be painted when they return. We also had a large electrical storm on April 8th, and it caused some problems at the water treatment plant. We've had utilities instrumentation services out there several days, and they've been optimizing several things. The VFD, that's a variable frequency drive for number 4 well, which is our largest well. They've reprogrammed that, and they've reprogrammed a lot of what's called SCADA, which is a software program that operates the different sequences of the RO system in the wells and going into the tower. So they've done quite a bit of work on that. Also, they hooked up our power generator, so it will come on automatically if there's an outage due to a storm. That's always been something that when we lost power, somebody had to come in and throw the breaker. It's a high voltage situation, so there was some safety concerns. Plus, having it go automatically, we can hopefully not lose power and have the plant continue to run consistently. Moving over to the wastewater treatment plant, as we've said, number one Nova filter was installed on March 29th. It's ran properly the entire time. The second filter is scheduled to be installed this Thursday, so we'll have both filters up and operating by the weekend. Looking forward to that. As you know, our limits are reduced or more stringent beginning May 1st, so it's very important to have our filters and RBCs up and running as soon as possible. Speaking of the RBCs gear drives were installed on Friday. There's still some electrical work to be done. ABB Dodge and Shouldice will be on site tomorrow to make sure everything looks properly aligned and ready to go. After we get the okay, we need to find out when they'll be coming back, and a week prior to that, we'll be, our staff will be turning all of those units by hand to get them rotated 180 degrees, so the heavier section that's sitting in the water right now will be at the topmost section, and we get some growth on the bottom. So that's quite a job. I anticipate that'll take us about 3 days with my full crew working on that to get those rotated. So hopefully in about within 2 weeks, we'll have those all RBCs up and running. There's been a lot of conversation lately about the baseball bat sound at the wastewater treatment plant. We've discussed this a few times at council meetings. That is the detonator or the flame gas burner for the methane gas burner for the digester. That's an off-gas unit. You'll see those flares at landfills frequently that are burning the excess methane. We burn our methanes to get rid of the odor. Otherwise, it vents out through the roof and causes an odor complaint in the system. So we have the option of not running that system and having the odors, or running that system and having the sound of the igniter going off. So I've had 3 companies come out to look at that unit. I've had Tri-County Electric come out. I've had Utilities and Instrumentation Services come out. And I've also had Alltech Mechanical come out. None of them can optimize the system. We've talked to E&L, who was the company, I understand, that installed the equipment. They're located in Illinois, and they will not come out due to the COVID situation right now. As soon as that's cleared up, I'll have them come out and see if there's any suggestions they can have to make to optimize that system a little more. But that sound is a normal sound, as it's just like having a gas grill and having your spark start the flame, but it's industrial sized magnification. So we'll continue to work on that. And then the other item I have on here is the north secondary clarifier. We had a blockage in the sludge line, so we've taken that unit offline. We're going to back flush it. We still have to have that offline a little bit for the Nova filter installation, because we need to have all the plant flow going into a clarifier, so the guy can work on the filter. So we hope to have that cleared up by the end of the week as well. And with that, I'll attempt to answer any questions you might have.
Very good. Well, my apologies. I'll go back to my normal rotation and begin with Councilmember Kamara-Sulak and end with Mayor Pro Tem Gearboss. So Councilmember Kamara-Sulak, any questions for our wastewater treatment superintendent?
Oh, thank you. Can you remind me, Ms. Rogowski, for the Nova filters, the warranty starts after 90 days of them working properly? Is that correct?
You know, Mr. Campbell, you may recall that. I'm sorry, I have a hard time with that number. I'm not certain. I can get that information to you, but it has not started yet.
It's 100. Well, it's 100 days from when they start. So the first Nova filter that was installed in March, that 100-day clock has begun.
That was March 29th.
Yep. And so then the second clock will begin once the second filter is installed and operating.
Okay. So as long as it's operating, but say there's some issue with either of them within this 100-day period, then you would contact them and say, hey, we have X issue going on, and then they would come out and take a look at it?
Correct. They would have a service crew come out, correct the problem, and then that 100-day clock would start again.
Okay, very good. That's what I was wondering. How many of the RBC gears drives were installed?
8.
8, okay. So once those are checked out and given the okay, then will we have all 18 of our RBCs functioning properly?
Yep, we'll be fully functional, and we'll have some spare units coming back as well.
Okay. All right. And then lastly, the digester baseball bat sound. Has that been an issue for, I mean, I've heard that it's been an issue off and on. Do you hear it when you're at the plant? And how often is it periodic? And is there any way to, well, I know you can't insulate it or block it, but I'm just wondering if there's any way to mitigate it.
Well, we've attempted that. You know, the interesting thing about that unit is when you're standing close by, it's not that loud. So I think it has something to do with the way it carries, and it's probably more evident when the foliage isn't in bloom. So, like I say, the unit ignites when the pressure builds up enough to give it the okay for the valve to turn on and the unit to ignite. So perhaps because it's not optimized right now and it's a very specialized piece of equipment, that the detonator may be going off more often to it fails to light the first time. So maybe it's more frequent than normal. But
Okay.
as far as the sound, I'll certainly check to see if there's something that can be done, but it's an open flame that's probably 3 to 4, 5 feet high, and it has a wind guard around it, but I don't know how else we could insulate that.
Okay. I wonder if, how we've talked about the fence, if that would have any, if that would provide any help with that noise. But again, I'm just thinking out loud. I wish there's some way that we could help out Mrs. Armbruster and anybody else that is subject to that noise. And then, do we have any other issues at the plant? Any levels that are out of compliance?
No, so far so good. I haven't got the complete April data yet, but I'll report on that at our next meeting. Okay.
And then any progress on getting the data into the monitoring? I forget the name of it offhand. The monitoring and manual system.
You know, I've looked at the tutorials the last week, but to be honest with you, it's been extremely busy due to a lot of requests by everybody about what's going on at the wastewater treatment plant. It's kind of hard to concentrate on the normal duties with you know, a lot of stuff going on right now and various meetings. So it's my priority. I've got the RBC gear drives tomorrow. I've got the filters on Thursday, but as I get time, I certainly will populate that, and starting with the filters and the gear drives.
Okay, it's perfectly understandable with all the changes, and you know, we're very happy to hear that you know, we have a Nova filter working. We've got another one that's going to be coming online in the RBCs. So you've definitely been putting a lot of time and energy that is very, very appreciated. So thank you, and that's all that I have right now.
Thank you, Councilmember Kamara-Sulak. Councilmember Delorico, any questions for our wastewater treatment superintendent?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Steve, I'm relieved to see that we're making some forward momentum on the RBC gear drives. I really personally feel that that's a huge component in addressing the issues that we're having at the plant. If we have all those online and functioning as they're intended, we may be able to make a severe dent in the issues we're facing there as well as having that second no filter online and in place. And it sounds like by the time we have our next council meeting 2 weeks from today, that we may have some important information to communicate on that front. So I just want to commend your efforts there. One question I have is with respect to the water treatment plant, the issues with the well and the SCADA system. Has the water quality suffered at all in light of these issues that we're having at the water treatment plant, or is it just some technical stuff that residents don't really need to be concerned about at this point?
No, it doesn't affect the water quality whatsoever. We have various wells that we run in combination, and when we had the storm, it messed with the programming for one of our wells that wasn't currently in service, so we were able to salvage that piece of equipment. And then we also have an influent flow meter that all the other equipment operates off of, and that's a mag meter that has a magnet and a flux. Without getting into detail, the electronic portion of that needed to be replaced. The actual meter itself was okay, but the electronic portion needed replacement. And so UIS has been really optimizing all of it's all computer controlled and a ladder logic type program, and they've gone through and optimized everything. And it was running well, but it's running even better now. So I'm really happy with that.
Okay, really good to hear that. And then the last question I have is with respect to the detonator. Is it a problem with the magnitude and intensity of the noise, or is it with the frequency of the noise? When you say it's not optimized, does that mean it's attempting to detonate and having a higher failure rate, or is it that somehow over time it's become louder and louder and more of a nuisance?
You know, my understanding is there's been complaints about the noise periodically since it was installed a few years ago. I suspect, I don't hear it from my office or when I'm on the plant, but I do hear it when I'm next to it. I suspect that it's failing to ignite all the time, so it may be clicking more often than if it was optimized.
So what system did we have in place before this one was installed a few years ago?
You know, I really don't know if it was just venting to the atmosphere or if there was, I think there was a smaller unit, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I guess once we have this company that actually installed the unit able to come and evaluate the problem, they'll find some way to make it more efficient so it goes off less.
So yeah, my thought is the noise level will be the same, but it may be less frequent.
Okay.
That's my assumption.
Okay, and I think to your point about the foliage not being in bloom, that's probably the biggest thing that would shield the actual decibel range that residents would experience as a result of the detonator going off. So it's probably going to be particularly loud in the winter and spring months, but I guess the less it goes off, the more efficient it is, the better the situation will be. So hopefully they can come out soon.
Yes, I agree.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Del Orco. Councilwoman Mitchell, any questions for Wastewater Treatment Superintendent Wygowski?
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you, Mr. Wygowski. Thank you for the information. I remember the igniter really well. Mr. Campbell was taking me on my first tour of the wastewater treatment plant. So that was in the year 2017. I don't remember that the igniter made noise. And I looked back among my emails. I haven't heard of any neighbor comments that the igniter made noise until the spring of 2019. So my concern is that, you know, I understand the COVID is affecting us, and I'm concerned about that equipment, that it's working properly. I did tippy toe out of bed last night, and I drove across town because I wanted to experience what the neighbors were hearing. So I was kind of bummed because I had waited about 15 or 20 minutes and nothing happened, and then all of a sudden it went off. And it's respectably loud. And so I guess my concern is function and the fact that it was working one way before and started changing in spring of last year. So then I have a question about flushing water mains. We've had some residents, especially on the west side of town, discuss cloudy water. And there was a discussion that we needed to flush these water mains. And I think the plan was to do it this spring. Can you give an update on that, please?
Sure, I'll defer to Mr. Fordyce for that.
And that's handled through the Department of Public Works. Jeff, are you still there?
Yes, sir.
Oh,
Please.
Yeah, so we were beginning to schedule a spring flush, and then we, as we were getting ready to publish that information, we were kind of getting into the COVID period and not really sure how we were going to staff things. I have been working with Steve. Steve has provided me information on this, the water tower project. We are still trying to figure out how to staff a full flush prior to that water tower being taken out of service for its maintenance. And hope that that'll go forward.
So when you say we're trying to figure out how, do you need to hire some temporary workers? Do you need to hire contractors? It seemed pretty important that this flushing be done. I'm not sure how long it's been since that main was flushed.
It's we're talking about the entire system, not just one main, and it is exceedingly important, and it has been much too long. What the challenge right now is just changing COVID regulations and trying to maintain this split shift and having enough people to do that.
Right.
So I think I think we've entered what I think is the last leg of COVID changes. I think things are getting looser from here on out. So as we work on the reentry plans that we talked about earlier and what kind of staffing restrictions we're going to have, we'll be able to figure this one out and get this.
So the construction ban is lifted at the end of this week, I think. Is that going to affect your staffing? Does that mean you'll be able to run a fully staffed DPW force?
It does not.
It does not. Okay. And then when do you anticipate? How long after people return to work, your full force, how long does it take to organize this flushing? When do you think it could be done?
Within this month is what we're trying to do.
Nice. Okay. I appreciate it.
Any additional questions, Councilwoman Mitchell?
No, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Councilman Seo, any questions?
Yes, just one follow-up to Ms. Mitchell's question. Once you begin the flushing program, Jeff, how long does it take to accomplish the whole system?
Well, it varies. It depends on how many people we can put onto it and what our water supply is. I think with all the issues that we've had with some pressure problems have been resolved. So we're looking to do it overnight. A long time ago, doing the flushing overnight was the norm. When the new water plant came online and we had lower iron levels in the mains, we switched for labor-saving reasons to doing the flushing during the day. That worked very successfully for a while, but at this point where we are now with the length of time it's been since we've had a good solid flush, we want to switch back to the nighttime. That gives us a lot fewer complaints, because while we're cleaning things out of the mains, we also stir things up in the mains and we get an increase in complaints. If we do that overnight, it gives the vast majority of folks are not using water at night, gives things a chance to settle down, and we have fewer issues like that.
Okay, thank you. That's all, Your Honor.
Thank you. Councilwoman Dillon, any questions?
Thank you. Just a couple, please. So I'm going to start where Mr. Seo just left off. And it's probably a combination Jeff-Steve question, which is, so just so I can understand, we really need to have flushing done before the water tower is painted and before it's drained and painted, correct?
That would be best. I mean, the sooner we can get this done, the better. If we don't get it done before the maintenance on the tower begins, we have to wait until that maintenance is complete.
Okay. So have we kind of worked through that with the painters and sort of coordinated those two schedules to make sure that we're all on the same page about that?
You know, I think I addressed that earlier when we're not sure whether they're going to paint a tower in Georgia or not before they come back to Michigan. So we're on their schedule somewhat, you know, when they come back. So they would not put the job off until the flushing. So we'll have to coordinate around the painting schedule.
So then should this be our top priority right now? Because could they be here at any point if this job in Georgia doesn't happen for them?
I'll have some further information this week, but we can't do the flushing right now because Jeff doesn't have the staff to do the flushing currently due to the COVID arrangements.
Right.
And it is my top priority, trying to come up with a way. Right now, my thoughts are around with the current labor restrictions, a COVID-safe way to bring additional people in off of the off shift, and trying to. That's my line of thought is
right.
Bring more people in safely somehow.
Right. I guess what I'm trying to figure out is if you're running alternate crews, I mean, is there a way, because you're saying you want to flush at night.
Right.
So your off crew would be the night shift, and then your on crew would be the day shift. I'm not trying to step on your toes about it. I'm just trying to figure out to make sure that we don't miss our window to do it. And I guess that's where I'll stop with that. And obviously that's in your wheelhouse to figure out the details of it. So, Mr. Wygowski, you know that I'm going to ask you about Nova filters because I always do. Sure. So I'm so happy to hear that it's running. So happy. Here's my question. Is there a situation in which it could be running? Like, do we run tests on it while it's running to make sure it's optimally running? Or that, like, so that we know that there's an issue before it actually breaks?
No, it's a mechanical issue. So what we'll do is periodic cleaning. In fact, with the agreement with Novell, they're going to come up twice a year and do the periodic preventative maintenance and do a cleaning of the system, and that's the recommended frequency. So they'll be instructing our folks how to do that according to their specifications. So for the most part, these units have ran until they break. There's no, there may be some wear indicators on the wheels in the past, and then we'd shut it down before they break. But as far as mechanically, those hubs will spin until they're broken. And the hubs have been greatly reinforced, so we're optimistic that they'll continue to work.
Okay. Well, I'm really glad to hear that, because I keep thinking, what if it's wearing and then on day 102 it finally snaps? And so, where it had been a process all along, but that was the day of the incident.
But we'll still be under the 2-year warranty at that time. That's when the warranty begins.
Right. And so I just wanted to make sure. As far as the igniter, I believe that I remember there being an issue, and I don't want to speak for other people, but I believe, and maybe other people remember, that I believe the Roths talked about this a couple of years ago, that there was a noise. Yeah. So I don't believe it's a new sound. And so I guess what I'm concerned with is there a way to go back to the manufacturer and see if there's a different technology, if there's something, rather than going through electricians. I mean, obviously the creator of the product would probably best know their product. And so I'm just trying to figure out, is it too small of an igniter for the gas outpour? Is it too big? I have no idea. I'm just saying that, have we explored whether there's other equipment that we could be utilizing, or maybe it needs 2 igniters so that it's less? I don't know. I don't know that technology at all.
I'll tell you what I'll do is I'll check with Brian Rubel of Tetra Tech and see what they based their decision on when they recommended that prior. I don't know if there were some alternate technologies, or if that's the state of the art, or what the if there are any viable alternatives. But with the installer, L&J Technologies, I'm hoping with this COVID situation right now that they'll be able to come up and maybe give us a little better information. But it is highly specialized, and that's why I've tried to use local people, but to no avail. And they're pretty smart people. They just don't work on that piece of equipment.
Right, and that's what my concern is, that maybe the people that have produced it would have some better insight to it.
And I did mention in there also that Alltech Mechanical, they do our HVAC service generally, and they volunteered to come out and shadow L&J when they're up here doing the work, so they can learn about the system, and they'll do that at no charge, so they can work on the system in the future.
Oh, I appreciate that. So, Mr. Wygowski, one last question for you. On the RBCs, when you rotate them to where the water part is on the top, do they just stay that way at that point when you're draining the water? I mean, it just seems that they would be top heavy and they would automatically try to rotate back down. So how do they balance up?
Yeah, you are correct. So we take a hand crank to that, and you have to spin it many, many times to move an inch. Probably, I don't know, maybe 50 times to move an inch. So it takes a lot of cranking. And as that heavier weight gets up, it gets harder and harder, and it wants to come back down. So once we get it to the top, we have an iron bar, and there's a hole that you can put the bar in to hold that in place so it doesn't can't spin in either direction.
Okay. And there's no risk of damaging them in doing this process?
Correct.
Okay. Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for all of your information. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Mayor Pro Tem Gearba, any questions?
Not at this time.
Okay, very good. Two things I forgot. My apologies. I should have shared these under reports and announcements. First, and Mr. Gearba helped to bring this to my attention this weekend, there has been some confusion about the Memorial Day Parade and associated festivities. And so I wanted to clear up the confusion for the community's benefit. As I noted a month ago, the Memorial Day Parade and festivities were canceled, and that was a decision that was made by the leadership and volunteers at our own American Legion post. That's not an event that is organized by the city of Saline. It's an event that's supported by the city and organized by the volunteers at our American Legion post. And I have to tell you that in light of recent events, they made the right decision. It's very regrettable. It's an event that I enjoy. I take great pleasure in speaking at the cemetery each year, and I regret that I won't have the opportunity to do that. But it was the right decision. We're hopeful that we'll be able to do it in the future. And on the topic of the Memorial Day, Mr. Fordyce, could you or somebody from your staff confirm either tonight or in the future? My understanding when I spoke to Tim Driscoll from our American Legion post is that he and his volunteers still plan to put the American flags and other patriotic paraphernalia downtown. Has someone contacted your office?
Yes, and I relayed back to them the status of our MDOT permit for that installation, so they know those dates. I haven't heard confirmation from them that they've got their volunteers arranged to work within that 2-week period or not.
Can you follow up so we can report that at our next council meeting? Because one of the things that I shared with my colleagues here and with the folks from the American Legion Post is, one, it is my hope that we have patriotic paraphernalia and flags downtown. And in addition to that, I am planning to, on YouTube or some other online platform, provide a Memorial Day narrative similar to what I usually do at the cemetery each year. So, okay, thank you for that. And then the other thing that I wanted to share, because an email just came on my screen earlier this afternoon, the call was made. The July dates for the 2020 Celtic Festival. We will not be holding the event, in July. The executive team and the co-chairs will be having a conference call on the 10th of May to discuss the possibility of those alternative dates that we approved a few meetings back. So I will keep you on the loop on that in the ensuing weeks and months. Mr. Campbell, we're getting pretty close to 10 o'clock. Can you provide a brief update on both the organizational review and the strategic plan? And at the conclusion of your abbreviated remarks, I'll entertain questions if there are any.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just briefly, I've provided you with the supplement update for the current fiscal year strategic plan. It shows where the status of the ongoing items. So if there's any questions on that, again, And I could certainly go through each one if you all like, but it's getting late, so whatever the council would like to do.
Yep. Do you have anything to share on the organizational review?
I'm sorry. I'm ahead. I do not. I do not have any information.
Okay, well, we'll take both simultaneously, or we'll deal with both simultaneously, excuse me. Councilmember Kamara Sulek, any questions or comments reference the organizational review or strategic update?
None at this time.
Very good. Councilmember Del Orco?
Not at this time.
Okay. Councilwoman Mitchell?
I think my only question will be what kind of context I think you've said you're having your team meeting to talk about reopening City Hall, and I'd just be interested to touch on the strategic plan and how you think that's going to be affected when you give your report. If I could make that request, please.
Certainly.
Okay, thank you. I'll set, Your Honor.
Yep, thank you. Councilmember CO?
Nothing at this time.
Okay, Councilwoman Dillon?
So thank you. I appreciate that. I guess, Mr. Campbell, just really quick for sort of the Reader's Digest version, is there anything in this document that we need to focus on that's been altered to, I mean, I know we've had to sort of shuffle the deck based on budget. Is there something that we initially looked at as a priority that has now fallen off? I just want to make sure that we're all sort of on the same page about that.
Certainly. So you're talking the strategic plan?
Yes.
The proposed for 21?
Yes.
Okay. So I tried to put in the yellow highlights some notes. And for instance, I was just looking at, my apologies, I believe on goal 2, for instance, the action items, number 2, apply for accreditation of police department. After talking with Chief Hart, proposing with the changes and whatnot with staffing, staff proposal, we would delay that until fiscal year 22. He will continue to do just like the status of the current fiscal year strategic plan talks about. He's still continuing to do the review and do new policies to work towards the accreditation, but to push that off. But I did just, as I was looking at it, I think I've got to double check with my team, but I think where it says, so number 2, where it says apply for accreditation, and it says 2A, define and implement policies for marijuana. I think that should be 3, then which the subsequent numbers would need to be renumbered for that particular, the action items for goal 2. My apologies for that. But yeah, to Councilman Mitchell's just recent comment here a moment ago, I have asked my team to review this to see if there's any changes, and I'm going to review that one more time with them at Wednesday's leadership meeting to make sure. I've gotten a couple comments, but not all of my department heads have commented to whether or not the proposed fiscal year 21 strategic plan, if there's any other changes that we may need to do in light of, to your point, the COVID-19 pandemic.
Okay. I would like at some point to revisit this document at a point where it's not at 10 o'clock at night, because there are things, and just right in the same area in which you just spoke about, which was number 4 under goal 2, which is evaluated community recycling composting. That now has gotten delayed off until fiscal year 2022. And I don't know, are there fees associated with that? Is it personnel issues? I guess I'd like to sort of look at why something like that is getting, exploring it. So I would like to spend a little bit of time on this at some point. And I'd also like to kind of look back at the last strategic plan and sort of see what items fell off and make sure that we're okay with the fact that they fell off. Just because they weren't identified in the listening session, we tried not to influence people utilizing the current document, not this current document, but the current document at the time. And so I just want to make sure that we hadn't been putting efforts into projects that now are sort of back burner or completely off the charts. So I guess that's what I'm going to say is that, sometime in the future, I would like to set up some time where we can address this, maybe for an hour of a work meeting or something, and kind of go back to it again and make sure that these still are our priorities.
Agreed wholeheartedly. That was the thought of, you may recall, was to see if council had any. Now I know it's getting late, and I'm not suggesting but the intent was to have any comments or questions from council to see if there's any specific items. Actually, I think, not to speak for Mr. Gearbach, but I do recall him when I presented this draft a few weeks ago. I believe Councilman or Mayor Pro Tem Gearbach said something about, well, yeah, we may have to go back and look at redoing the whole strategic plan as a result of the pandemic. So yeah, I would actually welcome that. That would help staff as well better understand the direction of council. And my assumption is that staff input would better help council understand staff's perspective as well.
Okay. And one last question for you, Mr. Campbell, is that have the business ambassador duties transferred to Mr. Green at this point? Or is Ms. Bennett still doing them? Is there some sort of a hybrid? Because it was my understanding that that was going to fall onto his plate, correct?
That is correct. It will at some point. We at least in what we've talked about was that 6 to 9 months in the transition. Mike has begun to work into that position. I know certainly, I think Mickey Joe would be happy to relinquish that, take that hat off. I know she enjoys it and she does a great job at it, but just her plate is overflowing, as we all know. But yeah, they have worked on some things together, like with Main Street and with we do have, when we've had a couple check-ins with updates with Ann Arbor Spark. Mike has sat in, as have I, from time to time. So yeah, that process is not complete, but it has started going forward.
Okay, because I know that, and the reason I ask is that there are a lot of duties assigned in the strategic plan that fall to the business ambassador. And so I just wanted to make sure who's doing that aspect, and that things weren't falling through the cracks. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councilmember Gearbaugh. Any questions?
No questions, but I just feel that at this time I need to make a statement just from the perspective of individuals, members of council and staff and everyone need to understand that we're at a period now where most people are feeling significant fatigue from everything that's been hitting them, and understanding and expectations need to be considerably addressed when we're looking at the issues that are coming up. I understand people are upset and have concerns about things, but our staff have been working their tails off to make sure that we've kept the city up and running at this point, with more issues and things going on right now. So yes, I do agree that our strategic plan needs to be addressed, and we really have to look at it from a perspective of not knowing what is coming forward. There's some things that are just going to have to sit on the back burner, but there's other things that if we don't move forward on them, we're going to lose the opportunity, or we're going to jeopardize the taxpayers and the ability for city to be affordable. So when we look forward into some of these aspects, I think what we have to understand is that we've been operating on some seriously short, what do I want to call it? Short tempers and approaches that we need to back up and stand back and look at what is best for the city and how we can actually move forward, I guess. Tonight I'm a little bit concerned with a lot of the repetitive stuff that came up. I think there's some questions and things that we all have, but if we can try and work forward and work with our staff ahead of time during this game, we can make our meetings a lot more effective. We can provide additional ability to have the answers that we want and expect. And I think that's where, as we look forward in our organizational aspects and how we look towards our strategic activities, we just need to be a little more, I guess, aware of all of our concerns and aspects of this time. And it's such a difficult time But at this point, that's all I have to say.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Mr. Campbell, anything else you'd like to add? You're muted.
Nope. Not unless there's, happy to do my best to answer questions.
No, I think we did a round of questions, so I think we're good. If folks have anything else, feel free to reach out to the city manager or email him. That exhausts the discussion portion of tonight's agenda. Again, I'll note for the public's benefit, because it does look like we have a few members of the public who are participating. We appreciate your patience and endurance this evening. We're about to come to the second public comment period, so if you have comments or questions, feel free to type them in. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time, make comment or question to City Council. This public comment period will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to provide comment is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record. And again, if you type in your comment or question, it will be read and preserved as part of the public record. We'll give you a few moments. And again, I would ask the city clerk. Clerk Royal, did we receive any comments between now and our previous public hearing?
No, we did not. But Mayor, at the beginning, you did add COVID and work meeting under discussion. Did you have something more you wanted to add to that?
We actually addressed those under reports and announcement. It was two things that Councilwoman Dillon proposed. So we're not going to discuss the SAGE compensation study at our next work meeting on the 11th. We're just going to be discussing the budget. And then we requested a comprehensive report from the city manager by the end of next week regarding the opening of city services in City Hall so that council members could be informed and disseminate appropriate information to the people we represent.
Okay, just wanted to make sure we didn't miss it. So thank you.
Thank you. I'll ask one more time. Are there any citizen comments?
Excuse me, Mayor, may I just make a comment quickly. Was this meeting put onto Facebook Live? I think we had discussed it. My question is, I just want to make sure there are not comments sitting out there that we're not addressing.
Mr. Campbell, can you address that? I can pull up Facebook here.
I believe it was. Chris, I don't know if Chris can comment. Chris had planned, when I talked to him late afternoon, he was planning to have it on both the Facebook as well as YouTube platforms.
Yeah, so it looks like I'm going to do some tweaking on it. It did start, but it didn't run continuously. So at the time when it started, there weren't any comments, but I will tweak that and correct it for the next meeting.
Very good. One last call if there's any citizen comments. The record will reflect that there are none. Please note our upcoming meetings. And at this time, Mr. Gearbaugh, would you be amenable to adjourning at 10:08? You're muted, Dean.
Yes. Good thing I was muted.
Moved by Gearbaugh to adjourn at 10:08. Councilwoman Dillon, would you second?
Absolutely.
Been seconded by Councilwoman Dillon. All those in favor of adjourning at 10:08 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. Good night, you all. Be smart and stay healthy.